Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the D and WhatIf, with another fanfiction. This is the 7th part of What If Deku Were Dead and he reincarnated into a cat. All credits for this video go to their respective authors. So please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Itoshi was tried. In fact, everyone was. Kirishima was holding a dirty and derpy Kaminari on his back. Kaminari flashed a thumbs up while his nose bled lightly, and he wasn't the only one given a free piggyback ride. Ochako was on Ida's back trying to calm her motion sickness. Hell, Bakugo was holding Aoyama on his own back. But not before saying, if you shit on me because you can't control your quirk, I'll end you. One moment they were overlooking the massive forest. The next thing Hitoshi knew, Moss was not only taken from him, but he, along with everyone in 1A, were tossed over the cliff and landed on the ground below. And they were in for the fight of their lives with monsters made from the earth. Their only warning was Aizawa yelling, "Lunch is in an hour. See you then." That was 4 hours ago, and the sun was starting to set and turn the sky a dusty pink. Fighting dirt monsters in the vast forest wasn't exactly easy or quick for all of them. But they were here, sweaty, dirty, and dusty. Congrats. One of the wild pussycats, the leader Mandalay, clapped for them. Everyone groaned. Itoshi felt his disbelief grow as Moss was being fawned over by Ragdoll. The bouncy woman was jumping up and down while also twirling. A green ragdoll. Like me. Holy crap. He's adorable. She cooed. She's been like this for hours. You'd think she'd wear herself out by now. Tiger, the extremely buff man in a skirt, laughed as he watched Ragdoll with Pixie Bob. Aizawa walked up to Mandalay and smiled. You guys look like you've seen better days. That was so unfair, Mr. Aizawa. Several students yelled in his direction. Itoshi clapped his hands together to get rid of some of the dust from his hands. Mr. Aizawa started going over rules while shrugging off any and all complaints coming his way. Ochako groaned as Ida and Sue helped bring her to the ground. She really overdid it when fighting today. Once everyone calmed down, and knowing that no amount of yelling was going to change anything, they were told to unpack their things and get ready for dinner that was being cooked for them tonight, but only for tonight. After tonight, it was going to be up to them to work as a team to make dinner. When Itoshi went to the boys' side of the cabin, he passed by a little boy. A boy who looked positively angry at the world. The boy had a red hat with golden horns pointing out. His hair was in Kai black, and he looked like Bakugo with how angry he looked. Hello there. Itoshi crouched down as he smiled at the boy, and he extended his hand out. My name is... The fist came fast and hard. Itoshi wheezed when a tiny fist made contact with his apple bag so hard that it caused Itoshi to fall to the ground. Mother, he censored himself while crying. Several people were laughing at his expense. He knew it. One of them being his traitorous friend, Monoma. Monoma was laughing so hard that he was on the ground with tears coming out of his eyes. The boy's hand was suddenly grabbed, making him cry out as Takoyami held his hand up in the air, stopping him from attacking anybody else, and to stop him from walking away. That wasn't necessary. Takoyami narrowed his eyes at the boy. Well, the child didn't like this as he struggled against Takoyami's grasp. When he got too rowdy, Dark Shadow actually swooped in and picked him up by his underarms. You fiend. Ida came to Hitoshi's aid when Monoma, who was still laughing, didn't. I don't want to talk to any of you wannabe heroes. Let go of me. The boy screamed as he continued to kick against Dark Shadow. Wannabe. Ida yelled aghast. Momo, the goddess she was, made an ice pack which Shoto iced up. I think I'm going to puke. Hitoshi groaned as his stomach roiled over, and he was glad he hadn't eaten anything in a while. Otherwise he might have actually thrown up. Kota. Mandalay turned her sights on the commotion and gave a bit of an exasperated huff as she grabbed Kota by his wrist and took him away from Takoyami and Dark Shadow. The boy didn't apologize as he just allowed himself to be led away with ease. It was then did Moss remember his role as Hitoshi's support animal. To be fair, Hitoshi couldn't blame him as Ragdoll was holding him hostage for a good while. Because Hitoshi was on his side, it was easy for Moss to squeeze between Hitoshi's arms and just lay down. Moss smelt like perfume and dirt mixed together, and something about that scent was a little comforting. It would take 10 minutes for Hitoshi to finally get up with the help of Ida and Sato alike. It would take roughly an hour, but Hitoshi would recover and feel okay again after the unexpected attack on his gonades. They would be served dinner, and that's when Moss took off. Where are you going? We don't know this area well, and I don't want you getting attacked. Hitoshi nearly stood from his spot to follow his cat. I'm just gonna explore around nearby. Don't worry about me. Then he was gone before Hitoshi could protest. Okay. Itoshi spoke out loud as he watched Izuku take off. Izuku followed the scent up to a cliff quickly. He dodged a rock thrown his way. Leave me alone. Oh. The boy, Kota, lowered his hand that had another rock in it. It's just you. Kota snorted as he plopped down on the ground and chucked the rock off of the cliff. What do you want, you dumb animal? Now, if this was anybody else who had punched Hitoshi the way this kid did, there wouldn't be a doubt that Izuku would be on one path, the path of revenge. But this wasn't a normal case of bullying. No, this was a child that was clearly angry at the world and all it had to offer. So, Izuku put all personal grudges aside and put on the cute charm. He let out a soft mew and padded up to the boy. HMPH. The child, no older than 6, turned away from Izuku and pouted. I'm pretty sick of cats. You know, Izuku walked right into the child's lap and gave a deep purr as he rubbed his head up against Kota's chin, and Kota sneezed when Izuku's tail flicked under his nose as a result. Though, you aren't like the others. You're actually a cat. Kota sighed in defeat when Izuku flopped in the little boy's lap and rolled onto his back. Kota huffed. Meaty. He mumbled but complied and knew not to touch Izuku's belly as he just stroked Izuku's head. I guess you're kinda cute. For a dumb animal. The boy gave a rare smile while he continued to stroke Izuku's head, flattening Izuku's ears against his head as he did so. Then it happened so fast. The boy let a few tears drop. The tears splashed against Izuku's head and made him look up at Kota. Kota gave his eyes a quick wipe. I'm not crying. You're crying. Kota wept softly. Then next thing Izuku knew, he was being used as a tissue. Kota picked him up and just wept against Izuku's side softly. It's not fair, Kota whispered as he held Izuku close. Izuku just allowed this. He was an emotional support animal after all. Kota let tiny sobs rack his frame as he cried. Why didn't they love me as much as they loved random strangers? Kota asked as if Izuku could answer, and even if Izuku could answer, his answer would be, who is they? But he just let Kota cry it out. It's all he could do in all honesty. Eventually Kota would calm down and stop crying before too long. It's easy for you, you know, Kota whispered once Izuku was placed back on the ground. Your parents abandoned you one day and you learned to survive on your own and forget about them, but Kota put his knees to his chest and wiped his watery, puffy eyes. Mine left me for a bunch of strangers. It's not fair and I'm not ready to be on my own. A picture was starting to form in Izuku's mind, but before he could get to the bigger picture, Kota stood up and wiped his hands on his shorts while still sniffling. If I don't get back soon, he hiccuped a little. Aunt Shino is gonna send Ragdoll to find me. I don't like Ragdoll, so walk with me. Not like you understand. Izuku walked a few paces ahead of Kota and then just made a come on gesture. Wow, I guess you do understand me ... at least a little, Kota whispered as he started to follow behind Izuku. The walk back to camp was short, with them returning to an empty and clean eating area. The others are probably going to the hot spring if you want to meet up with them. Kota grumbled a little. I gotta see Aunt Shino. Kota huffed a little before shooing Izuku away. Go on, go, he ordered in a pushy tone. Izuku would turn and leave for the springs when Kota insisted one more time. Honestly, the springs weren't hard to find. All he had to do was listen for the excited chatter of the students. Once he found it, he didn't even think. He went for the first entrance he could find and he rushed for it. Immediately he realized his mistake, but it was too late. Mossy, Achako grabbed him by the harness before he could leave. Mossy, all of the other girls, all of which were naked, cheered. Next thing he knew, his harness was removed and he was put into the water. Izuku gasped as he swam quickly. He's adorable, Mina cooed while watching him swim. Izuku didn't mind water. In fact, he loved baths, but he didn't want to bathe with the girls. He felt like a pervert. Itoshi. Izuku looked around for a way out but couldn't see one. Suddenly he was grabbed again. Easy there, Moss. Momo pressed him close to her chest. Itoshi, whoa, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Where are you? I'm in the springs with the girls. Itoshi, they're all naked. Momo is holding me. Momo was unbothered as she stroked him with her wet hand. Izuku could feel Hitoshi laughing. Then from the other side of the wall came Hitoshi's voice. Hey, do you guys have my cat? The girls erupted into giggles. Yeah, we do, Mina called. But you're not getting him back. Hagakure snatched Izuku from Momo and held him up like an offering to the sky. You get him every day and now it's our turn, she cried for all to hear. Itoshi hummed. Have fun, traitor. Now he most certainly could hear Hitoshi laughing as he swam back to the guys. Izuku was put in the water and he finally found a solution to this awkward mess he put himself into. He found floating on his back while staring up worked just fine, thank you. Look at him. He's so cute, Mina cooed as he just let the water take him. This was fine. This worked perfectly. Until it didn't and he bumped into someone. Gyro just looked at him. Hey, little dude, she said, and Izuku didn't know why, but that did it for him. Seeing the reserved and quiet Gyro naked, nope. He was better than this, damn it. Izuku flopped forward and swam. He swam as fast as he could to that wall. I'll look at him go. One girl cooed, who? He didn't know, nor did he care. He was a better cat than this. Izuku made it to the wall and he just started climbing, using his claws to his advantage. Girls let out cries of alarm as he did this. Hitoshi, catch me. Izuku was nearing the top of the wall. Catch you, he heard Hitoshi say out loud in surprise. Well, Hitoshi must have seen Izuku's ears from the top of the wall as Izuku heard a sudden oh shit. followed by splashing water. Izuku stood up on the wall and shook all excess water off as he gave a loud meow. "Catch me," Izuku demanded once he was dried off, and he jumped. Well, Hitoshi didn't have to, because Dark Shadow emerged and caught Izuku right out of the air and gently brought him to the water. "You drama queen," Hitoshi huffed as Izuku floated on his back. "I've seen things I've never thought I'd ever see." Izuku just floated on his back and away from the boys. It was most certainly an interesting first night at the camp. The next day everyone was relaxed and ready to start training. Despite everything they've gone through, they hadn't really worked on their quirks much, and that's what these next 2 weeks were going to be about: expanding their powers and making themselves even more powerful. During the day they were going to do grueling training. At night after dinner they get to do some fun things, except for those in remedial classes, that is. 1B was here as well, and before Hitoshi knew it they were all swept up into training. Moss was somewhere, but that didn't matter right now. Takoyami was swept away to a dark cave and warned Hitoshi not to follow. "Revelry in the dark," he would say before vanishing. "What?" Hitoshi asked, but then shrugged and left Takoyami to be. Hitoshi needed to work on his quirk, and therefore he needed a partner, and one would come to him. "I want your help and you want mine," Bakugo said matter-of-factly. "I want bigger explosions and you want a partner. You think I can make you have bigger explosions?" Hitoshi asked with a bit of a smile as he ran his fingers through his hair. "It's getting rather long." Hitoshi supposed he would have to get it cut soon. "Look, Izuku was the expert on quirks and shit, but I feel if you brainwash me and tell me to make the biggest explosion I can muster, then ... who knows? We might get somewhere, right?" Bakugo inquired, and Hitoshi waited out before shrugging. "Maybe. Won't know unless we try, I guess." And thus began a day that would start out relatively fine but would end with everyone sore and exhausted. While the others were off training, Izuku found Kota hiding out in the same spot as last night. Kota immediately perked up when Izuku trotted up to him. "It's you." Kota shook his head and changed reaction. "Oh, it's the dumb cat. What do you want?" Izuku laughed on the inside as he padded up and sat down next to Kota. "You belong to that boy ... the one I punched, right?" Kota looked at Izuku's vest. "Hi Itoshi. HMPH. Kota then huffed as he just patted Izuku on the head. "Whatever." Then he gently scratched Izuku under his chin. Izuku purred at this before Kota pulled away. "I like it here," Kota told Moss as he sat with his feet dangling off of the edge. "It's quiet and the adults don't know I'm here, which is why I'm careful about always returning before Ragdoll can track me. This is my spot, and I guess it's yours as well since you're the only one to find me." Izuku flopped onto his side next to Kota, and Kota reached and patted him. "It's peaceful." "Yeah, I get that," Izuku thought as he looked out at the forest before them. It was large and massive, and just listening to the birds and wildlife below. Kota grabbed one of Izuku's paws and started to massage between Izuku's pads. "My mom and dad ... they abandoned me, like your parents did to you one day. Only they abandoned me to save strangers," and Kota sniffled as another hiccup left his mouth. "Why wasn't I enough? It's not fair." He huffed as his shoulders shook and tears started to flow again. There it is. His parents must have been heroes, and now ... he's alone. Izuku knew what to do. He stood and padded over to Kota's side, and he placed his head on Kota's lap. Kota hiccuped as he rested a hand on Izuku's head and just continued to cry. "That's why I hate people like them, heroes. Heroes would rather save a bunch of strangers than be with their family." Izuku let the kid pour his tiny heart out and vent something that's clearly been festering for a long time. Izuku let out a loud purr to try and help calm Kota down, and it seemed to work a little as Kota did quiet down, if just a little. His fingers were gentle while he ran them up and down Izuku's spine. I'm not a crybaby." Kota sucked in a breath as he began to calm down even more. I miss my mom and dad." He whined and leaned down to press himself against Izuku's fur. "It's okay." Izuku mewed as he felt himself start to tear up as Kota used him as a tissue again. "Why'd they have to leave me? I don't understand. It's not fair." Kota hiccuped and pulled away. "I'm sorry. I know you don't understand me, but I know you won't tell anyone." "Not like you can. You're a cat." Kota rubbed his hands against his cheeks to wipe his tears away. "Do you miss your mom or dad? I bet you don't even remember them." This made Izuku feel a frown tug on his mouth. "Mom." His mind slipped to his mother. "Maybe you do. Cats aren't all dumb. But I miss my mom and dad." Then Kota laid on his back and allowed Izuku to climb on his chest and curl up into a tight ball. "Gonna take a nap?" Kota asked, and Izuku really wasn't. He didn't know what to think right now. As the days went on, Izuku always met with Kota on the cliff while Hitoshi ate with the others. Also, as the days went on, Hitoshi's head was aching and his body started shaking as he expanded his quirk past its normal level. Today was officially Hitoshi's 16th, but nobody, not even Hitoshi, cared right now. His birthday wasn't going to be celebrated until he got back to Musutafu anyways, so no feelings were hurt. Though, Moss was sure to give Hitoshi a happy birthday, and so did his father, but that was about it. "Hey, could you read my mind?" Kaminari had asked while they ate their dinner one night. Or mine? Monoma asked and Itoshi just groaned. No, why would I want to? He asked rather bluntly while he cradled his aching head. He wasn't the only one trying to calm their nerves or shakiness. Momo looked so tired and almost sickly as she inhaled not one, not two, but 3 full plates of food. Monoma had his hand bandaged as he had decided to try and use his quirk and copy Bakugo's all day. It left his hands blistered and caused his wrists to swell up the size of grapefruits. Kaminari's nose was constantly bleeding due to his overuse of his quirk, and not just that, but being hooked to a car battery would do that to anyone. Takoyami was keeping his distance from everyone, and if anyone tried to get close he would get up and make it a point to stay by himself. So, everyone was just leaving him be. So, here they were, an exhausted mess, and they weren't allowed some reprieve from the pain. Oh no, now tonight they have to do a test of courage after dinner. Something buddy system, something freights. Itoshi didn't know. He didn't care. He just wanted to get this over with. So, after dinner they were getting ready to go with Itoshi being paired with Gyro. Both purple-haired teens just had the same attitude about this let's get this over with so I can sleep. Itoshi was so over it that during the first few scares that 1B had planned neither he nor Gyro so much as jumped as they kept walking. I'm so tired. Itoshi broke the silence while he rubbed at his head. Ikean Nuo. Gyro let out an exasperated groan. I am too. Itoshi huffed softly while he walked. I wish Mossy was here but he found a new favorite human. You talking about the kid? Yeah, but I can't fault him, he is an emotional support animal. Gyro gave a tiny smile but then stopped suddenly and put a hand out to stop Itoshi. Her hand touched his chest and he tilted his head. Gyro, shush ... you hear that? She asked and Itoshi shook his head. I'm sure it's the next group coming to scare us, he tried to say and keep going but she suddenly grabbed him and stopped him. Get down, she demanded suddenly and pushed Itoshi to the ground just as something broke through the bush with a roar. Itoshi let out loud gasps as he and Gyro both scrambled back, as a Namu roared at the sky. Not just any Namu either. This was a Namu that Itoshi fought with Bakugo. The massive Namu. Itoshi put both of his arms around Gyro and stood, keeping her protected. Not here ... not now. Itoshi whimpered. Happy birthday. Nice's giggle made Itoshi slowly and shakily turn toward his voice. Nice was standing in a nearby tree and was smiling as he hung upside down from a branch. It is your birthday today after all, and what's a birthday without a surprise party? Itoshi let out a groan as his eyes started to flutter open. The lights were bright, too bright, and made his head hurt. What happened? Happy birthday. A familiar face leaned down into Hitoshi's own face. Nice the camp Gyro. What's a birthday without a surprise party? The massive Namu roared to the sky again before it swung its massive arm right at Gyro, and the poor girl was thrown off of her feet and went flying into a nearby tree. Gyro, Hitoshi cried in alarm and stepped forward to go and get her, but he was suddenly grabbed by the massive Namu. The Namu had a tight grip on Hitoshi's arm and kept him off of the ground and immediately strained Hitoshi's shoulder. Let go of me. Hey, Hitoshi, I got a new quirk. I hope you like it. Nice smiled as he looked at Hitoshi. Then a sickly sweet smell invaded his nose and made the inside of Hitoshi's nose tickle. Chew. Hitoshi sneezed and then he blacked out. Everything flooded back into Hitoshi's mind. Nice ambushed the camp and there were Namus. Hitoshi and Gyro tired to fight but the giant Namu. Hitoshi started to struggle before he let out a cry. Let go of me. He jerked his body from side to side, but he quickly learned he was tied to a chair with thick chains that were already starting to bruise and chafe against his skin. Don't panic. I'm not going to hurt you, Nice whispered as he crouched down in front of Hitoshi. It's a birthday party. Nice threw his arms up as he cheered. All that met with that cheer was dead silence except for the smoky man Kurogiri, cleaning the bar quietly. Hitoshi let out several quick breaths as he looked around. Then he swallowed hard. His throat felt painfully dry. I'm rather thirsty, Hitoshi whispered against his better judgment. Of course, Nice popped up with a smile. He went to open his mouth to say something else but stopped when the TV flicked to life, cutting through the air with a tense silence. Hello, my son. I see you've managed to bring your friend back to the bar, a deep voice said, a voice that sent electricity of fear down Hitoshi's spine. This is Monoma's grandfather, Izuku's father. All for one. Yes, the new quirk just as you said it would. It's amazing. Nice turned and smiled at the TV. The man couldn't be seen but there was no doubt he was watching. Oh, I should explain. Itoshi, my dad gave me a quirk that was similar to Midnight's quirk. I can secrete this. What did you call it again, Dad? Smog. I can secrete this smog and I can make people fall asleep, which is how I got you out of the camp so quickly. Oh, Itoshi whispered as he felt himself shake in his seat. Izuku, yes Dad, you can have your party with Hitoshi, but once it's done I wish to speak to him privately. This is how I die. Itoshi whimpered out loud. Die? Oh no, I would never hurt Izuku's friend. I merely wish to talk to you. But please, enjoy your birthday party. Then the TV went dead. Nice smiled and stood. let me go get the other presents I got you. Kurogiri, please keep him entertained. Of course. Then Nice ran off. There was silence. It was Kurogiri that broke it. What happened to Tamura? Is he alright? Kurogiri asked, and Itoshi shrugged. He was arrested, so I can't answer the other question. I'm rather thirsty. Can I have a drink? Kurogiri's purple eyes narrowed a little before he nodded. Of course, anything for Izuku's friend. What would you like? Whiskey. You're a minor. Oh, sure, you'll kidnap me, but you won't give me a strong drink. I see your morals. Kurogiri snorted. I'm not giving you whiskey. How about a rum and coke? Anything. I might as well get my first sip of booze before I die. Kurogiri started to make the drink. Once done, he walked over to Itoshi and put the straw to his mouth. The soda masked the burning of the booze, but the rum made the soda rather flat. Thank you, Itoshi whispered once he was done. It's like my master said, you're not going to die. Kurogiri patted Itoshi's head. If he wanted you dead, he would have done it by now. I got the presents. Nice came into the bar with 4 gift boxes in his hands. Don't worry, none of these are like your muzzle. I could use my quirk, but with Kurogiri watching and with Itoshi looked at the TV that had a recording camera on it as the red light flashed. Using his quirk was out of the question. So, he was quirkless for now. Nice ... Don't you hate me? Itoshi was afraid to ask such a question, but it had to be done. Nice declared Itoshi to be his next target, but now it was like he didn't even remember what happened on that construction site. Hate you. Nice hummed as he put the presents down. Yeah, I did. I mean, I wanted to kill you. To make you pay. But now, Nice hissed as he slammed his hands against the ground. Then he straightened up. But I'm over it. Father and the doctor fixed me. They said I wasn't acting right. So, here I am, and I'm just glad to have you as my friend. They tampered with him, like a malfunctioning robot. Itoshi wondered. Nice put the box on Hitoshi's lap. I'll open it since you ... Will ... Nice gestured towards Hitoshi's bound arms. Nice. Tada. It's a cat pillow. Nice smiled as he shoved the pillow in Hitoshi's face. It was rather cute as it was in the shape of a cat face. It was a calico cat coloring. Thanks. It's lovely. Nice. Next present. I think you'll love this one. I know I liked it when I read it. It's a manga. Nice opened the next present and it was in fact a manga. Cat massage therapy. Maybe you could get the other me ... No ... That's not right. Nice pinched the area between his nose and groaned while shaking his head. That cat. Maybe you could get that cat to do this to you. Of course ... The whole point of kidnapping you was to get your ... Cat ... Nice looked a little lost and his eyes dulled for a moment. He quickly shook his head. It looks adorable. Nice listen. Hitoshi was trying to speak, but Nice just wouldn't let him. Nice almost seemed panicked as he scrambled for the next present. I found this Jew just for you. It's a dead rat. I don't know why. Nice looked at the present inside of the box but didn't remove it. Thank God. I thought I'm sorry. He then tossed the box away from him and Hitoshi alike. Nice, please, just let me speak. Please. Nice screamed out as he slammed his hands against the ground suddenly. It sounded like it hurt with the way his hands smacked against the ground. Nice's shoulders started to quake. I'm trying. I know, don't hate me. I don't want to be hated. I can't handle being hated again. I know I'm just a ... null to you, but I can. Nice looked up at Itoshi and he now had tears streaming down his gray cheeks and leaving streaks. I can be better. I want nothing more than to be your friend. Izuku. Nice grabbed onto Hitoshi's shoulder. You know what it's like to be rejected. I'm sorry I scared you. I know I deserved what you did to me. Please. Nice pressed his head against Hitoshi's chest. Please ... Don't reject me. Nice. I want to apologize. Itoshi whispered. I never meant what I said. Nobody deserves to go through what you did. I was scared and I acted poorly. Hitoshi swallowed a lump in his throat. I acted like my uncle. Like you pointed out. I never want to be like him. Nice gave a watery smile before hugging Hitoshi tightly. Then you'll be happy to hear that your uncle is dead and never going to hurt you again. Nice whispered, and that made Hitoshi's body turn cold. Oh, when did you? A few days after he shot you, I think. It's hard to say. Nice pulled back and had a sickly smile on his face as he suddenly became scary. He died after I threw him down the stairs to the cellar. To be fair, I wasn't kind when I beat him with the wooden spoon. I think I broke ... 4 spoons. In the 3 or 4 days we had him in our custody. But father didn't like that, so I was fixed. His eyes muted as he pulled back and away from Hitoshi. But what matters is that he didn't get away with what you did. And now, all is forgiven between us. No more bad blood. Yeah. Itoshi looked away from Nice. Good. Now for your last present. Nice put the final present on Hitoshi's lap and opened it. He wanted Itoshi to look in. Please don't be another dead animal. Itoshi leaned forward to look into the box. There's nothing there. That's right. Because this final present is ... Well, it's a surprise. Like this party. It's a big one. But one I know you'll love. But it's for later. Oh ... Can I have a hint? Nope. Cake time. Oh dear God. Itoshi felt his breath start to pick up as a panic attack was close to coming on. He was doing his best not to cry, not to scream, he just wanted ... He wanted to be back at the camp. Boss, Itoshi tried to connection for the first time as Nice's back was turned. Rude Nice was now standing over Hitoshi in just a blink of an eye. He had a thick slice of chocolate cake with white icing all around it. His green eyes were dull as he glared down at Itoshi. The plate was shaking as he was gripping it so hard that his knuckles were turning white. Nice quickly shook his head, and his glare faded as he smiled and shut his eyes. I mean, as much as I'm glad you found a way to talk to that cat, we're not ready for him yet. Nice put some cake on a fork and with no warning he shoved the fork into Hitoshi's mouth. So why don't we keep the telepathy to a minimum? This party was meant for you after all. Nobody else. The cake was dry and the icing was marshmallow fluff. Hitoshi hiccuped and nearly inhaled the cake down into his lungs as he tried not to cry. I'm sorry. Hitoshi whispered that the fork was removed. All is forgiven. Nice smiled as he cut another slice of cake. Sorry, there's no candle blowing. I couldn't find candles in time. Then he jammed another forkful down Hitoshi's throat. Hitoshi, what's up? You done with the courage test yet? It's been a while. Moss asked unbothered. Itoshi was on the verge of spiraling. They don't know. They don't know. He kept repeating it over and over again in his mind as he tried to stop himself from rocking back and forth. He wanted to sob. I don't understand. He cried after he swallowed the cake down. Understand. Oh, why has nobody noticed your absence yet? Nice asked as he cut another piece of cake on the fork. Well, you see, we took you during the test of courage, did we not? Not only that, but yelling, screaming, ungodly roaring is to be expected. Nice shoved the fork back into Hitoshi's mouth. Not only that, but we got you at just the right spot. Nice took the fork out of Hitoshi's mouth. Nobody was around to see it happen, and everyone probably assumed the screaming and my Namu's roar was part of the test. Even 1B I'm willing to bet. Nice hummed. Gyro is unconscious. They had to have found her body, Hitoshi yelled, and we met with cake being shoved into his mouth again. Just eat your cake and enjoy your party before they notice what happened. Hitoshi, is everything okay? The others are talking about how it's been too long since they've seen you or Gyro. Moss sounded concerned. Nice leaned down so they were eye to eye, and those dead green eyes made Hitoshi swallow hard and almost choke on the cake going down. His eyes were dull again as a sardonic smile spread across his face. Nice pinched Hitoshi's cheek. Tell him everything is fine. Yeah, everything is okay. I just snuck off to lay down. Hitoshi thought about his next move and he prayed this would work. You know me, Izuku, always looking for a chance to rest after training so hard. I love you. Nice slammed the rest of the cake against Hitoshi's mouth. Sticky icing and chocolate cake smeared all over Hitoshi's face. I am Izuku. Nice roared in his growing ire. Not some cat. Me, young master, please, calm down. Kirigiri grabbed Nice's wrist and yanked him away from Hitoshi. That's not how you treat your friends, remember? Kirigiri scolded Nice. Nice grunted before taking a few steps back. His breathing was hard, his mouth twisted into a snarl. Itoshi let out a soft cry. Everything overboiled and made him start to cry as tears started falling from his eyes. Please, he cried. I just want my dad's. It felt childish to say out loud, but it was the truth. He wanted nothing more than to be comforted by his 3 dads right now. Yet, here he was, covered in cake, bound to a chair with chains, and crying for his dads. Nice's anger started to slowly dissipate as if a realization overcame him and he quickly ran off. He would return moments later with a bowl and a wet rag. I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. Nice apologized as he dipped the rag in the bowl and gently started to wash Hitoshi's face off. Don't be too angry with me. I'll make it up to you, I swear. Nice had tears spring into his eyes as he looked beside himself. He let out several hiccuping breaths. I am better than this. Nice continued to scrub the mess of cake and marshmallow fluff off of Hitoshi's face. Izuku Midoriya doesn't slam cake into his best friend's face when upset. Hitoshi, through his own spiraling panic attack, could feel Nice's own panic attack coming on. I don't want to be fixed again. I don't. Nice's voice turned high as he slammed the rag into the water and tried to get the cake and marshmallow off of the rag. I'm sorry, he repeated as his shoulders shook and tried to breathe. It's okay, Hitoshi whispered. Hitoshi knew he should feel weird about having to comfort Nice, his kidnapper, but he worried what would happen if he didn't console Nice. I know you didn't mean it. His own voice turned high and quivered near the end as he felt himself shake even more. I messed up, he whimpered and then looked at his lap. I never meant to upset you. Nice's breathing leveled out and he exhaled slowly. Okay, let's just both agree we made mistakes, he whispered so softly that Hitoshi almost didn't hear him. I think ... that's enough cake. I think so too. Itoshi agreed as he looked everywhere except for at Nice. Okay, party is over. Let's go and see my dad. Yeah. Nice smiled and grabbed Hitoshi by the back of the chair. He wants nothing more than to meet you, and I can't blame him with how much I've been hyping you up to him. Let's go. Hitoshi swallowed, his throat growing even more dry than what it was previously. Okay, something was wrong. Izuku was sure of it. Everyone was so carefree as they laughed and joked with one another, but more than a couple were looking out at the forest edge waiting for Gyro and Hitoshi to return. But they wouldn't. In fact, 1B would return before Hitoshi and Gyro, and that was when alarm bells were raised. Momo was the first to approach Kendo, and the two would speak briefly that ended with Kendo shaking her head. Momo looked back at Monoma and then gave her head a shake as well, and that made Monoma look uncomfortable. I'll go get a teacher. He skipped off, and Izuku's heart was pounding as he watched Monoma go. Itoshi. He tried the mind link for the umpteenth time, but he would get no response. Izuku looked around at the others. People were now standing around as the mood was starting to shift amongst everyone once the fear of their own being lost in the woods. I will admit that the roar you made, Shishida, was pretty nerve-wracking. Ayama complimented the 1B students. Shishida shook his head. Everyone says that, but I never let out a roar. I just gave chase to the unsuspecting. Shishida explained, and Izuku's ears went low. I never let out a roar, but I remember a roar. Izuku remembers hearing a roar echo around the forest not once but twice, but he was with Kota and assumed, what else could let out a roar like that? What massive being could let out a roar so loud that it scared birds? Izuku's ears went low as his eyes went wide. Namu, nice, shit, Kota. Izuku let out loud moans as he rushed and looked around for Kota. He couldn't see the teenager anywhere. Kota, he yelled, let out low mews of distress. Right here. Two strong hands grabbed Izuku from around his middle before he was picked up off of the ground. Is everything okay? Kota inquired, his voice soft, and if it wasn't for Izuku's improved hearing he probably wouldn't have heard him. No. I think before Izuku finished, Ragdoll popped up almost out of nowhere. So, a couple of kittens got lost. No worries. They must have just ran off the path. My quirk will find them in seconds. Ragdoll smiled while reassuring the others. Ragdoll activated her quirk as she looked towards where the test of courage had taken place. Then her smile started to drop. She looked off towards the side and then the other side. She started frantically looking around in every direction. That's not good. Ragdoll. Mandalay approached her and the concern became clear across the leader's face. Is everything okay? She whispered, the two of them making sure to keep their voices low so as to not alarm anyone. Ragdoll frowned before looking at Mandalay, then she just slowly shook her head. I don't see them. Everyone. Mandalay's voice flew into everyone's heads in a matter of seconds. Please return to your cabins. Whispers broke out as students started to return to the cabins as requested. Izuku started to struggle against Kota. No, wait. Izuku tried to fight against Kota. Wait, let me go. Kota looked a little torn as it was clear he didn't want to let Izuku go against orders, but in the end he decided to let go of Izuku. Izuku turned and rushed towards where the pussycats were hurrying towards the remedial school. The students that were taking the classes were jogging off towards the cabins. Shouta and Vlad both emerged looking rather confused about the interruption. What's going on? Aizawa inquired as he stepped forward. Is someone hurt? No, we got a couple of missing students. Mandalay started to explain as they walked inside of the classroom quickly for privacy. Izuku managed to slip in before the door shut. The problem is, Ragdoll frowned. They're not in the forest. It's either that or they're too far for me to see them, but it doesn't make any sense. There's no way they got that far. No way, even with how long they've been gone. If they ran, they should be only a few miles out at this point. Ragdoll explained. Okay, who's missing exactly? Shouta inquired. Gyro and Hitoshi. Izuku watched as Shouta grew grim. Itoshi, he asked again just to make sure he heard right, and Ragdoll nodded. I'm ashamed to admit it took everyone, not just us, a while to realize they've both been missing in the first place. With the test of courage, everyone figured they were too scared to come out the other side, Mandalay said while shaking her head. But the question is, what happened to them? Izuku stepped in and jumped on a nearby desk. Boss, Aizawa asked as Izuku jumped over to the chalkboard. What is he doing, eraser? Vlad inquired when Izuku started to dust his paws with chalk dust from the eraser. His green paws turned a dusty white and he stood uneasily from the chalk and eraser tray on his two hind legs. Is he actually? Before Tiger could finish, Izuku started to write on the chalkboard with his paws. It was interesting to say the least. The dust tickled the inside of his nose and made him sneeze more than a few times in a row, and so viciously that it made him stop his writing for just a few seconds. Once his sneezing stopped, Izuku was able to finish his message. It wasn't his usual tidy handwriting that he remembered having as a human, but it got the point across as he got back down on all fours and looked back at the adults. Shouta was the only one in the room to understand. Nice, Mandalay asked after a few stunned moments of silence. Are we just going to gloss over the fact that the cat just wrote in kanji? Pixie Bob demanded, but true to what she just said, it seemed they were going to ignore that for the moment. But how? This place was kept top secret, that only the teachers should know. There's no way. Shouta sucked his teeth as he started to pace. Wait, slow down, Eraser. Who, or what, is Nice in the first place? Mandalay asked, and Vlad sucked in a breath before crossing his arms. It's hard to explain fully. Vlad shook his head and then put a hand to his head, so much so that it makes my head spin just trying to think about it. Is a Nice a faker or pretender? Ragdoll asked, which caused Shouta to nod. It's a nickname we've given him as it's not his actual name. You see, Nice is. He's a Namu, but a more advanced Namu. Nice was once a quirkless 14-year-old boy named Izuku. Now he has more quirks than I can count, and he's not exactly dead either, but at the same time he's not Izuku. Nice has it in his head that he's Hitoshi's best friend, and has it after not just Hitoshi, but he also has it after Moss here. Shouta pointed at Izuku, who just nodded to the others. Why would a Namu be interested in a cat? Tiger inquired the obvious, and Shouta looked at Izuku, and Izuku nodded again, giving him permission. Moss, as I'm sure you all have noticed, is not a normal cat. He's not only hyper-intelligent, as you can see. Shouta gestured towards the board, but he's had this quirk. A quirk that's somewhere between super region and immortality as a whole. We've witnessed this cat get flattened by a semi, and yet ... here he is. Not only that, but one of the quirks Nice has allows him to copy not just a person but their quirks if he bites them, and he's bitten Moss. Moss's quirk makes him feel ... warm from what I was told. So, Nice has made it his mission to get his hands on Moss. I can see where he's going with this, as he's tried it once before. There's not a doubt in my mind. He wants to do an exchange. Itoshi and Gyro for Moss. Shouta picked Moss up and held him. Izuku felt his ears go back as he looked at the ground. Damn it. Shouta tightened his grip on Izuku, and Izuku could feel the anger radiating off of him. This is bad. More than bad. Mandalay agreed. We don't know where this hideout could be, but not only that, it's going to take us at least a day for everyone, not just us, to get back to the city. If we get back to the city, we could have Ragdoll locate the 2 missing students, but do we have the time? I could leave. Ragdoll and I. The rest of you could stay here and placate the children. Shouta looked at the time on his phone. We could inform Netsu and other heroes about this and start a secret reconnaissance without the villains knowing. Shouta offered quickly. The children aren't dumb, Eraser. They'll know something is up. Besides, losing 2 heroes would put us at a disadvantage. I think it's best if we just send everyone back to the dorms, lest we lose more children because of this. Vlad argued. There was some silence as everyone pondered their next move, and Shouta finally just nodded with a sigh. Fine. Let's compromise. Vlad, Mandalay, Pixie Bob, and Tiger could make sure the children get on the buses while Ragdoll and I get a head start. Because it's going to take at least an hour or 2 to get the buses going and the children ready. Please ... one of them is my son. The longer I stay behind, the longer he has to spend with that monster. We can do that, Eraserhead. Go, Mandalay ordered, and Shouta nodded as he and Ragdoll quickly took off in the night for Ragdoll's car. Hang on, Hitoshi. Izuku heard Shouta say as he kept a tight hold on Izuku. Dad's coming. Nice was quiet as he left Hitoshi in front of All for One. Itoshi was still bound to the chair by chains, and there was nothing he could do except accept this. Nice quietly crawled into All for One's lap, and All for One put his hand on Nice's head. All for One certainly didn't look like the picture Hitoshi saw a while back. This man looked like a fried Mr. Potato Head with only a mouth to show for it. Hitoshi swallowed hard as he still felt intimidated by this man regardless of his looks. So, you're Hitoshi Shinzu. All for One said as he pressed Izuku to his chest and continued to run his fingers through his curls. Yes, Hitoshi whispered. All for One smiled, and it sent another wave of shivers down Hitoshi's spine. Izuku has spoke nonstop about you. I have to say though, after your last interaction I was unhappy to hear how he was treated. Hitoshi couldn't look at All for One anymore, and he looked at his lap. I was scared, sir. I apologized. Yep, so it's all good now. Izuku mumbled while grabbing his father's hand and messing with it. Regardless, I must ask something of you, Hitoshi. Itoshi felt his breath pick up and the hairs on the back of his neck prickled upwards. What would that be, sir? I simply wish for you to treat Izuku a little kinder from now on. You see, when he gets upset he gets ... not like himself. I'm sure you've seen it for yourself. Yes, good. All is good then. All for One seemed okay with that, and that made Hitoshi feel almost a little better, but he was still shaking. Izuku. Yes, Dad. Nice was different with his dad. He was stiff, more reserved, and quiet. I think it's time to show Hitoshi your last present. Yes, of course. Nice popped up from his dad's lap and grabbed the back of Hitoshi's chair just as quickly. Hitoshi, I'm sure you'll find this surprise to your liking if all my son has told me is true, that is. As you see, it's a present for the both of you with his birthday coming up in a few weeks. Hitoshi didn't like that. He didn't like that one bit. He could only stare as he was being dragged away from All for One. Izuku would be ashamed it just left his mouth right before Kirigiri's portal sucked them away from All for One. He was sure he saw the lunatic smile in those few seconds. Itoshi expected to be warped back to the bar, but that wasn't the case. Instead, he was warped to a large room with a bunch of tanks filled with a thick-looking liquid. Don't think about it. Itoshi shut his eyes tight. The room was creepy and made Itoshi shudder even harder. It was dark, and the only noise to be heard was the constant humming of a machine. Nyes was humming as he skipped while dragging the chair in front of him. "What is this place?" he asked just to break the uncomfortable silence. This is the doctor's lab. Not the main lab, but the lab where he works on test subjects such as extraction. Nyes explained unbothered. Extraction? Yep, I'll explain it all in a minute. There's the doctor now. Over here, Izuku." The doctor, an old and portly-looking man, waved them over next to an open tank. No, what Itoshi feared was very much a reality. He was going to be shoved in that tank. He started to thrash and scream. "Somebody help," he wailed while fighting against the chains. All he received was his own voice. SH. Nyes got in front of Itoshi. "It's okay. We're not going to take your life. I'd never do that to my best friend." "When did we become friends?" Itoshi demanded. Nyes smiled. "When?" Itoshi decided to shoot his shot and put Nyes under. "Release me," Itoshi demanded in his panic. "Oh ho." The doctor laughed as he witnessed this. "To see your quirk in action." The doctor didn't seem to stop this, as he was more than happy to watch as Nyes fished a key off of his person and started to unlock the chain binding Hitoshi to the chair. The doctor actually clapped when Hitoshi was freed. "Bravo, Izuku was right. That's a strong quirk." Hitoshi stood once freed and debated going for the doctor, but the doctor was just too okay with this. Yeah, Hitoshi was grabbed from behind almost immediately by Kurogiri. Kurogiri gave the Namu a kick to the leg. Nothing hard, but more than enough to break him out from Hitoshi's spell. "Oh, it's just as I thought it'd be. How brilliant, Hitoshi." Nyes was grinning widely. "I was wondering when you'd use your quirk on me, and you didn't disappoint me." "Yes." Nyes pumped his fists excitedly. "You see, it's a present for both of us. You hate your quirk and I want your quirk. So, it's been discussed." "No," Itoshi screamed as he kicked against Kurogiri, who was surprisingly strong. The man was leading him towards the tank. "I'm going to have your quirk, so I can always have a part of you with me." Stop it. Stop it." Itoshi was going to wake up, right? This was a nightmare. It had to be. It was a nightmare. "But don't worry, I'm not going to leave you without a quirk. I know how cruel people are to the quirkless ... so I've found the perfect quirk for you. It's just going to take a few days for us to extract your quirk and give you the new one." Moss, they're going to." Nyes suddenly had his exposed palm under Hitoshi's nose, and that sickly sweet smell tickled the inside of his nose. As they "Don't contact the cat. Don't worry, you're going to wake up and you're going to be so happy." Hitoshi felt like he was in a tunnel as his fight started to die and Nyes' voice started to taper off and echo all around Hitoshi's head. "You're finally being rid of your curse, Hitoshi," was the last thing he remembered hearing before everything finally went black. Aizawa was quick to call in favors. Not just Aizawa, but the moment Aburo and Hizashi got the word of Hitoshi's missing status, they also called in favors, and before the sun even rose that night, UA's conference room was filled not with just the UA staff, but also with other heroes willing to help, such as that of Hawks, Rocklock, and even Gang Orca. All good heroes that were willing to help. Then there was Grand Torino, someone Aizawa has never heard of before, but apparently, despite his age, was spry and more than willing to help. Izuku sat in Nedzu's lap while Toshinori, puffed up fully as all might, stood hovering beside the chair as everyone looked over a holographic map of the city. "Nyes sure has grown smart," Toshinori said while he turned the holograph map to try and get a better view of the city. This made everyone look at him. "What do you mean?" Shouted inquired. "Well, think about it. At the USJ when we first ran into him, he was angry, yes, but slow. He lumbered a lot and wasn't the fastest. Even during the internships, he was too blinded by his anger to really think or act in an intelligent manner outside of separating you from Bakugo ... But now, he managed to know the best time to kidnap young Hitoshi, and Gyro Toshinori tapped the table a few times with his fingers as he thought about it. He's getting smarter and stealthier in his moves." There was a heavy silence, and Izuku looked at Nedzu before looking away with a frown. "He's just some kid, is he not?" Rocklock asked. "Not quite, Yagi." Shouta almost pushed All Might out of the way as he took over the hologram and changed the image of that from the map to that of Nyes. It was a 3D hologram, making it easy for them all to see Nyes from every angle. "Why, that boy can't be older than 12. Rocklock looked shocked as he, as well as the other uninformed, were expecting a villain more villainous looking than 14-year-old Izuku Midori. Izuku sighed as his ears went low. "Here's the thing. This," Aizawa pointed at Nyes, "is the definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Nyes is a Namu. For those unaware as to what a Namu is a corpse that's been reanimated and stuffed with quirks to make itself more powerful. They are volatile and listen only to one person, their master, all for one. Which brings me to my next point. While Nice here doesn't look like a typical Namu, there's a reason for that. It's because Izuku Midoriya, this original body, is the son of All For One, the son that killed himself over a year ago. That brings up some implications I'm not liking. Hawks muttered as he scratched at his face. Yeah, no shit. Shouta sighed as he sat in a chair. Now, why do we call him Nice when his name is actually Izuku? Well, for the simple point that Izuku is dead. He died the day he jumped off the building. Shouta reached over and rubbed Izuku's head as he said this. This is no longer Izuku Midoriya. This is someone pretending to be Izuku. Hence the name we've given him. Nice. That's kinda fucked up ... So why Gyro and Hitoshi? Gyro was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. Itoshi, on the other hand, Shouta looked from Izuku to his husband's before sighing. It's hard to explain in full, however. Nice has it in his head that he and Hitoshi are friends. Not only that, but Nice is after Moss here. Shouta picked Izuku up and held him for the heroes to see. And Moss is Hitoshi's cat. Why on earth would such a thing want a cat? Gran Torino opened his mouth for the first time since entering the room. You see, Nice has a quirk that not only allows him to shapeshift, but he can also copy quirks once he takes blood. During the USJ, he bit into Moss, to put it lightly. Moss has a quirk that makes Nice feel alive. Nice has been gunning it for Moss ever since. There was a silence before Gang Orca said the thing that everyone was thinking. Why don't we just ... give him the cat then? Because that's what he wants. Shouta's eyes narrowed as he held on to Izuku a little tighter. Not only that, but you don't want him getting his hands on this quirk. Just trust me on this. If he gets this quirk ... he'll be impossible to defeat. The cat is just that special, huh? Hawks used a feather to snatch Izuku by his harness and bring the cat to him with ease. He let Izuku drop, and Izuku let out a yelp when he fell through the air before he was caught by Hawks. Hawks brought Izuku up to his face. Izuku stared into Hawks' yellow eyes, and Hawks looked from Izuku before he slowly turned his head to look at the picture of Nice. Izuku watched as realization seemed to have etched itself in the number 3 hero's eyes. Huh, Hawks whispered. Well, us animals gotta stick together, right? Hawks raised a fist up in a fist bump. Is this real life? Izuku wondered, almost starstruck, before he returned the fist bump by placing his paw on the fist in question. Then Izuku was returned to Shouta. Shouta grabbed Izuku out of the air and placed the cat in his lap. That being said, we need to use that cat as bait at the very least. This is what he wants, isn't it? This nice fellow. Fine, we won't give him the cat. Ectoplasm butted in and Shouta frowned. I think it's our best shot at getting Nice. Hizashi nodded before ducking his head. I don't like this any more than you, Sho, but Nice has Hitoshi and Gyro in his grasp, and if we can catch him. While I don't agree or disagree on using the cat as bait, we have Ragdoll looking for young Gyro and Hitoshi as we speak, don't we? All Might inquired. Yes, both she and Loud Cloud are patrolling the city looking for Hitoshi, but I'm starting to fear that the villains have some sort of anti-quirk measure because Ragdoll hasn't been able to spot the children at all. Shouta held on to Moss a little tighter. So for now the best we can do is wait. Shouta then swallowed hard while he looked out the window at the rising sun. But not for much longer, my dear Shouta. Nedzu patted Shouta's hand. If they come up empty, then there's one more measurement we could take. A measurement I know not everyone will like. Shouta challenged softly to Nedzu, and Nedzu nodded. But a measurement I know you'll take in a heartbeat. But for now let's wait. And wait they would. They would all painstakingly wait until nearly 8 in the morning. Over 12 hours since Hitoshi's kidnapping, give or take, and everyone was on edge by the time Oboro and Ragdoll came back shaking their heads. I circled the city 3 times. I'm sorry, Oboro whispered as hugged Shouta. They have anti-quirk measurements in place so nobody can find them. Ragdoll gave her own head a shake as she went to the wild pussycats. The others having returned just 40 minutes prior with the rest of the students now in the dorms. So, after 12 hours of not knowing where Hitoshi and Gyro were, Shouta had no choice as he looked back at Nedzu and nodded. Do it. To say Izuku was worried was an understatement. The last thing he heard through the mind link was Hitoshi screaming for help before it was abruptly cut with no warning. By that point, Izuku was fully aware that Hitoshi had been kidnapped, so for Hitoshi to scream for help through the mind link knowing Izuku was too far away to help didn't put Izuku at ease. So, now it was time for desperate measures. If you betray us, Oboro hissed at Tamura as he handed Izuku over to the ex-villain. It won't be Eraserhead you'd have to deal with, understand? Yes, Tamura looked from Oboro to the ground quickly. You've made your stance quite clear, Loud Cloud. He then held Izuku like one would hold a bag of cat food. God ... cats are lame. Tamura huffed while looking at Izuku, who wasn't wearing his vest for this mission as he knew he was going to need to make a speedy getaway and a vest would be a hazard. What's happening? A Ragdoll Tom looked at Izuku as he asked this before he was then handed to Tamura the same as Izuku was. This Ragdoll looked identical to Izuku in every way. Well, except for one. His fur was actually that of a traditional ragdoll, so they had to dye the poor Tom the same color of green that Izuku was. They even tried to replicate Izuku's necklace to the best of their abilities and limited time. Now Tamura had two almost identical cats in his arms. The key difference wasn't their looks but the fact that Izuku was now sporting a collar that had a GoPro attached to it. Don't worry about it. Just know this. What's your name? Izuku asked. Tom. Know this, Tom. When the kid with green hair and sharp teeth tries to grab you, you run, Izuku instructed. Okay, Tom mumbled, sounding a little uneasy, and Izuku couldn't blame him. Oboro then turned his sights to Izuku and gently tipped Izuku's head up to meet his eyes. Remember the mission, Moss. Bring us to Gyro and Hitoshi. We'll be watching through the GoPro when the heroes get there. I want you to run, don't stay behind. Run as far as you can. Understand? Izuku nodded and Oboro nodded in return. Good boy. And he gave Izuku a scratch behind the ear. God, I hope this works, Oboro whispered under his breath as he backed away. Remember, Tamura. Aizawa put his goggles over his eyes. We're all counting on you. Don't let us down. Tamura just gave a nod. I heard you guys the first 15 times. Geez. He huffed out, clearly growing irritated. You two ready? He asked as he looked at both cats. Izuku nodded. Tom was distracted by a piece of string dangling from Tamura's jacket. Tamura looked at the two cats and then nodded. All right, let's do this. Tamura released Masa block from the bar. Up there is where you'll find the tanks. I pray your friend isn't in one of them. It's been what? 14 hours. Tamura looked at the time and shook his head. It's hard to say if he'll be okay or not. Regardless, find him and the girl. I'll see how long I can distract them for. The mission was that of stealth. The last thing they wanted was a bunch of Nomas to fight, which is why Izuku was to go in first. With him being a cat, the odds of any Nomas being on high alert for him was unlikely. If there were Nomas, then the heroes could hopefully take them out stealthily. Tamura was wired so the heroes could listen in, and he even had a stealthy earpiece in. One so small that the others probably couldn't see it unless they looked hard enough. Still, Tamura shifted the makeshift cat in his arms. God, this thing was heavy. Granted, it was easier without both cats combined. They both weighed about 20 pounds, and he had to walk with both of those beasts. I should probably work out a little more, he realized as he looked at his scrawny arms. In the past, he didn't have to do much as he relied heavily, maybe a little too heavily, on his quirk. His quirk? What a joke. Tamura felt betrayal seep into his veins as he walked down the sidewalk and shoved his free hand into his pocket. It felt nice these last few weeks without a quirk. His insides weren't constantly itching, and he was able to use all 10 fingers again when doing something, like defending himself from Toga on many occasions. That girl was still a little upset about losing her quirk. It was ... the polar opposite for Tamura. If anything, he felt free without that curse of hit. Tamura stopped in front of the door and then sucked in a deep breath as the bar got closer and closer to him. His lips were drying again and his throat felt scratchy. The fake Moss let out a mew and started to struggle a little, clearly having enough of being held. Hold still, he grunted before he grabbed the cat by his scruff to keep him still. The cat didn't care for this but couldn't do much about it. Let's just ... get this over with. It took a lot of effort on his part, but Tamura would enter the bar. Young Kurogiri dropped the glass he had been cleaning, and it fell to the ground with a shattering noise as he rushed to Tamura. Kurogiri actually hugged Tamura before taking a step back to look him over. How on earth did you get away from those heroes? You take me for an idiot. Tamura scoffed as he stepped away from Kurogiri. I got away without your help, by the way. He sat at the bar and put the fake Moss down. Tamura kept a hand on the cat's scruff, again to keep him from running off. I apologize, Tamura. Kurogiri shook his head as he stood by Tamura. I wanted to help you, but by the time Izuku informed us of your capture, it was too late and you were locked away under heavy guard. There was nothing we could have done. Tamura scoffed. Can you get me a drink, Kurogiri? He demanded, and Kurogiri nodded. Of course, what would you like? Tamura looked at all of his drink options before looking down at the cat. Sex on the beach, he grumbled, and Kurogiri wasted no time making the drink. While he was mixing the drink up with expert hands, Tamura looked at him, watched his hands, watched for any inconspicuous portals. None happened, and so Tamura knew the drink wasn't drugged. When it was finished, Tamura took a nice long drink. It tasted pleasant, and the burn was welcomed as it warmed Tamura's throat all the way down. So, where's Nice? I didn't get this mangy cat for nothing, you know. What did you just call him? That's a rude name, you know this. Tamura's eyes went wide as he stared at the drink, unable to look Kurogiri in the eyes for far too long. Then, he swallowed hard and tried again as he looked into Kurogiri's confused eyes. A slip of the tongue, Tamura hissed. All the heroes called Izuku that while I was in prison. A sickening name indeed. Kurogiri didn't relax. Instead, he just kept his stare leveled before grabbing a nearby glass to clean. He's not here, he's resting with Master currently. I see. Then what do I do with this cat that I went through great pains of getting? Kurogiri's eyes flickered from Tamura then to the cat before he finished cleaning the glass and put it down behind him. Hard to say. We don't exactly have a carrier, but I suppose you could put him in the back room for now. A shiver went down Tamura's spine when Nais spoke suddenly. Don't be silly, Kurogiri. The Namu walked into the bar. He looked tired. His eyes had heavy eye bags under them. His body swayed from side to side as he was unable to walk straight. Izuku, I encourage you to go back to your father. You need to rest, Kurogiri urged as he stepped out from behind the bar and put himself between Tamura and Nais. Nais looked confused for a moment and then he just shook his head. No, he insisted before pushing past Kurogiri. If he got the cat, I need to see it. Nais then rubbed at his tired eyes before stumbling over. See, Big Brother follows through. Tamura smiled as he handed the ragdoll to Nais. The cat in question started to struggle when Nais grabbed him none too gentle. The cat let out a loud meow of protest when Nais pulled him up so they were eye to eye. Nais then tilted his head as he smiled at the cat. Tamura's heartbeat picked up rapidly as he let out a shuddering breath, but managed to suppress it with a cough. Quietly, he reached up towards his ear where the comm was hitting the button twice meant danger, but was he in danger just yet? Nais ran a finger down the cat's spine before he moved one hand to the cat's neck. He wrapped his hand around the neck and Tamura could do nothing as Nais squeezed. The cat let out a painful yowl just before his neck snapped in two. The cat was then dropped to the ground, his little paws still twitching. Do I look like an idiot, Big Brother? Nais put his hands on his knees while he leaned down so he and Tamura were eye to eye. That had to be the worst decoy you could have given me, Big Brother. Yep, danger. Tamura reached for the comm but his wrist was grabbed by Nais. For shame, Big Brother. For shame. Tamura grabbed his still full glass and smashed it over Nais's head to get Nais to let him go. Kurogiri tried to placate this whole situation but it was too late. Way too late. The bridges have been burnt. I should have guessed. Nais hissed as threw a punch. The punch connected with Tamura's jaw more than enough to stun him because when did this kid get so strong? Then Nais slammed Tamura's face into the bar. A pain exploded behind Tamura's left eye as he dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes. I didn't expect your loyalties to shift just like that. Spend a couple of weeks with the heroes and suddenly you've forgiven them for everything they did to the both of us. Nais started to pace around Tamura, his face pulled into a vicious snarl as he did this. Tamura spied a piece of glass on the floor. The glass shard was big and jagged. Tamura grabbed it without a second thought and he lunged for Nais. Enough. Kurogiri must have regained his senses or something because he made several portals, all making sure neither boy could hurt one another anymore. Tamura's hand slipped through a portal and the glass shard came out on the other side of Tamura's head. Now, isn't this interesting? Came all for one's voice from the TV. Tamura, have you forgotten how the heroes turned their backs on you? No, you turned your back on me. Tamura snarled at the TV. The quirk isn't mine. I'm quirkless. Tamura yelled in a fervent rage. I know because they showed me the quirk you gave me was killing me and you knew this. The bastard had the gall to laugh. And it never crossed your mind that the heroes were lying to you. Never. His eyes narrowed. Maybe at the start ... but to see the proof in front of my own eyes is different. It's a shame. I would have died for you and I think you know that. Tamura gripped the glass chunk so harshly that his hand started to bleed. Maybe I'm not the only one that needs fixing, Nais said as he stared at Tamura. Perhaps not. Tamura jerked his arm through the portal. The only one who will need fixing is you. Tamura roared as indignation ran through his entire body and burned red hot. He didn't even think as he managed to thrust the jagged shard towards Nais's face. He didn't even register the pop as the blade sank through Nais's right eyeball. Nais let out an inhuman screech of pain. It wasn't enough. Tamura knew Nais had the blood-healing quirk that helped heal wounds. But Nais didn't have regeneration, so Tamura pulled the glass shard out. There was sickly and wet pop and very little resistance as the eyeball detached from Nais's head. Nais continued to screech as he grabbed the empty socket and scrambled along the ground. Tamura looked at the eyeball that was now stuck on the end of the large glass shard. The air became heavy as Tamura knew exactly what he had done. There was no returning from this. I'm in danger. He realized a little too late. Well, thankfully the heroes had been listening, and as with no prior warning the door to the bar was blasted open. The first to be targeted was Kurogiri. The jumping hero, what was his name? Gran. Something jumped and kicked Kurogiri to the ground only to be followed by a red feather that shot itself through Nais's right shoulder. Hawks flew inside the bar and pinned Nais to the ground, keeping both of Nais's arms behind his back. So ... this is terrifying, Nais. Hawks smiled a sardonic smile as he stared at the Namu below him. Nothing more than a corpse. You did good, young Tamura. All Might came in last and patted Tamura's shoulder. Gave us plenty of time to find Itoshi and Gyro. You can't take him. Nais became feral in only seconds as tried his hardest to kick Hawks off of him. Nais's right eye was now screwed shut as the blood that was once leaking from the wound now started to dry in one large bloody smear. He's not ready. You can take the girl, but not Itoshi. Not ready, meaning we were just in time. Good. Hawks nodded with the others. You really thought you were being slick by taking the kid from the camp, weren't you? Nyes tried to push Hawks off of him, but Hawks must have been too heavy because Nyes couldn't get up fully. Kurogiri, can't you do something? Nyes sounded panicked as he looked at Kurogiri. There was a flash of black before Aizawa hung upside down from the ceiling light with his weapon. No, he can't. Not as long as I'm watching him. Nyes' one eye suddenly became tearful. You'll regret this. He then scowled. You all will regret this. Nyes then started to cough, his coughing turning violent. Tamura's stomach felt queasy before an itch in his throat showed itself to him. He let out cough that turned into a series of coughs the same as Nyes then. Black sludge left his mouth with no warning. Tamura. All Might reached for him, but it was too late. Tamura was whisked away by a portal that wasn't made by Kurogiri. All three of them, Tamura, Nyes, and Kurogiri, were taken away from that bar. When Tamura let out a gasp as he fell to his back, there, levitating in front of him, was All for One. Now, Tamura, let's have a talk about loyalty and why it's important. Izuku sat upon Hitoshi's tank and didn't move. He couldn't move. Not until this whole nightmare was over and Hitoshi and Gyro were safe at the dorms again. The Namus he managed to spot were taken down quickly by Midnight's quirk, and if there were some that put up a fight, Tiger and Ectoplasm were there to put them down. Izuku let out a meow, alerting the heroes of where Hitoshi lay. Jesus. Oboro ran through the lab as he looked at every tank. He looked unnerved by just the sheer amount of tanks that were full. Still, he and Hisashi skidded to a stop at this tank. How do? Izuku jumped from the tank and watched as Oboro struggled to open the top. Move Snipe pushed Oboro out of the way as he brandished a large knife. He wedged the blade of the knife in between the lid and tank and pushed up. In one quick movement, the tank was opened. A fog spilled from the open tank and Oboro made it into a cloud to disperse it easily. Then, with no hesitation, Oboro dipped both hands into the tank. It wasn't water but a thick and viscous type of liquid that spilled out of the sides when Oboro dipped both arms into it. He then pulled Hitoshi out of the tank. Hitoshi was stripped of his clothes. Both of his eyes were open, but he didn't move. He didn't so much as twitch. His eyes stared off into nothing. His hair was flattened and sticking to the sides of his face. Any machines he was connected to, Oboro and Hisashi quickly disconnected without hesitation. Once he was freed, Oboro put his ear directly against Hitoshi's chest. There was a silence as worry etched itself on Oboro's face before relief took over. He's breathing. Here. Snipe quickly unbuttoned his cape and draped it over Hitoshi to cover him. We found Gyro. Midnight yelled and Oboro nodded to Hisashi. Go to her. I'll get Hitoshi to an ambulance. Heard. Hisashi then jogged to where Midnight was so they could free Gyro as well. Oboro used his knee to help prop Hitoshi into his arms in a carry. Hitoshi was completely catatonic as he just stared lifelessly while being carried to the nearest ambulance. It was while he was being strapped to the stretcher was there a bang. This bang made everyone look towards the direction in alarm. What is that? Oboro gasped with an open mouth as a man started to float downwards. Izuku's fur bristled. He recognized that body and that build anywhere. Dad. All for One floated downwards. Number 8. Loud Cloud. The one that got away. Izuku's breath picked up quickly while Oboro stood in front of the ambulance. What do you mean? It was 14 years ago, I believe. All for One only touched where his right eye would be if his face wasn't hidden by a mask. Oboro put his hand to his dead eye, then he gnashed his teeth and stood his ground. That was you. Well, to be fair, I didn't even want you. I wanted the one that could erase quirks. Oboro gnashed his teeth so hard that Izuku was terrified they were going to break. But then the buffoons I hired lost your body in the rubble and you were found. You would have made a great Kurogiri. Shut the fuck up. Hisashi whipped out of the building so fast that he was just a blur. His quirk activated to its fullest with the intent to stun or even deafen All for One. Present Mike. The whole gang's here. All for One almost seemed to be finding this fun. Then with no warning, the impact of Hisashi's quirk whipped right back around and struck Hisashi full force, sending him back and forcing him to take out his squealing hearing aids. Izuku felt too stunned to move as he just stared at All for One in shock. There was no way this was happening. That man couldn't be his loving father, right? Of course he knew that answer. He knew that answer for almost a year now. The ambulance with Hitoshi took off quickly, the workers knowing to get out of there because it was going to get dicey. Oh, you took away my son's friend. All for One said as he watched the ambulance flee. Midnight came rushing out of the building next, Gyro in her arms. Gyro was in the same catatonic state that Hitoshi was in, her eyes half-lidded, her mouth agape. She, like Hitoshi, had been stripped from her clothes. Her ears, her quirk was gone. Izuku didn't have time to really focus too much on it as Oboro summoned a cloud and flew as fast as he could to All for One. Go, Midnight, Oboro demanded as he grabbed his staff, clearly getting ready for a battle. He won't win, Izuku thought as he watched Oboro get closer and closer to All for One. The sudden explosion that happened was more than enough to knock Oboro back and off of his cloud and sent him flying through 4 or 5 buildings. How cute. All for One almost cooed as his arm was now massive. You really thought you could take me, Aburo Shirakumo. Several loud popping noises flew through the air as All for One was shot through. Snipe was shooting in non-fatal areas, but it did nothing as he healed almost immediately. More heroes were hurrying out with those catatonic, fully aware that a fight was upon them. All for One turned towards where Snipe was, and Izuku watched as his father's arms coiled like a spring before releasing the same amount of air blast that sent Aburo flying. Because of the angle All for One was looking down at Snipe, who was on the ground, such a force caused Snipe's left leg to completely snap. The same thing that happened to Ochako just weeks ago. Midnight, can you knock him out? Ectoplasm asked hurriedly as Midnight finally got Gyro in the ambulance and the drivers took off in the same hurry as the others. No paramedic was wasting time. I can try, but I'm willing to bet that mask of his has a ventilation system. Clones of Ectoplasm rushed at All for One while a couple of clones helped get Snipe to his feet and rush him to an awaiting ambulance. All of Ectoplasm's clones were swiped down and defeated like they were made of paper. Izuku's breath hitched. They were losing. In just seconds, All for One took down not one but 3 heroes like they were newbies. Then came the explosion. An actual explosion, as the factory they were all just in went up in flames. The explosion was so massive that it knocked everyone, Izuku included, off their feet from the shockwave alone. Izuku felt the heat that singed his coat, heat that burned him in places, heat that was so hot that anyone still inside the building no doubt couldn't survive. Izuku panted with his mouth open and his tongue was out as he slowly rose to his feet. He couldn't hear anything but this high-pitched ringing. His legs wobbled and his head spun. Still, he managed to get to his feet and look out. The heroes managed to get out, but they were unconscious amongst the still smoldering fire. All that remained was All for One in the center of it all. All for One focused on Izuku, unaware of the fact that he was looking at his own son. Then rivets shot out, and before Izuku could dodge, he was stabbed right through. Izuku let out a yowl. Let's see what you have that has my son so interested now. That's a quirk. All for One gasped. The quirk of rebirth. No wonder my son wants you. No matter how many times you die, you just keep coming back. An immortal soul. What? Izuku felt a spark flash behind his eyes as he thought about his suicide. Was this quirk always with him? Was he born with this quirk as Izuku Midoriya? Yet, he didn't have the healing factor as Izuku. All the times he had to patch himself up after Bakugo burned him was still evident amongst Nai's body, unless did his suicide trigger his quirk? When he killed himself ... did his quirk literally awaken when he woke up as Moss for the very first time? It's a perfect quirk for Izuku. This way we both can live together for a long time. He's going to take my quirk and give it to Anamu. Izuku didn't know why, but he felt eyes on him. He turned his head and everything moved in slow motion when he saw Angel. The calico was sitting off in the distance. Get up, was what she was telling him without telling him. Don't let this be the end. I'm waiting on you, Kit. Izuku jerked himself free from the rivet by rolling along the ground. Blood poured from his side as this happened. Izuku managed to jump out of the way quickly as more rivets went for him. A quick one, aren't you? His father stopped suddenly, and that was more than enough time for Izuku to rush to freedom where Angel was waiting. Come on, Kit, Angel demanded once he was in reach of her. Together the two cats rushed down the sloping hill in tandem. You did wonderful, Angel complimented him. What are you? Izuku demanded as they ran to the nearest alleyway together. I'm just a street cat. Nothing more, nothing less. She smiled before picking up the pace. Izuku didn't believe that. Not one bit. Kamino was abuzz as people evacuated the area urgently while others watched the news, once a safe distance away. And when Izuku couldn't run anymore, they stopped in an alley where Angel helped lick Izuku's wounds clean. Izuku was fading in and out of consciousness. His wound was bleeding too heavily and he knew he was going to bleed to death. I think I'm going to die, he told Angel as he leaned against her. You most likely are, but I'm sure you'll come back. Yeah, in a few hours, usually. All right, I'll be here when you wake. Izuku leaned his head against Angel again and let out a slow sigh. The last thing he heard before losing his battle was cheering. All Might won. He won. The people watching the news screamed along with those running along the streets. All Might won. The day was saved and there were no deaths. The only problem, Nais was still out there. Izuku didn't need the people to tell him that. Nais got away and he was pissed. Bonus, Inko was in the middle of talking to Steven. The man was smiling as he told her about the deal that he managed to snag. It made Inko happy to see him so happy. Things may not have been perfect, but they were looking up. Right, she just couldn't get that cat out of her head. Those green eyes, no, don't think about it. The door to the visitation area opened and Inko didn't know why, but when this woman stepped through the door it made Inko sit up just a little straighter. The woman was tall, taller than Inko for sure. Her hair was white and her eyes, those red eyes that looked identical to her husband's own red eyes. She looked around before she honed in on Inko and Inko alone. With big strides she walked to Inko's table. Inko Midoriya, she asked. Her voice was soft but on the edge of worry. Steven and Inko shared a look before Inko looked back at the women. Yes, Inko answered softly. My name is Shino Monoma. Her breath wavered as she shivered. And she took out a picture from her person. I'm pretty sure my father is your husband. I'm sure your son, Izuku, is my half-brother. Tamura was lucky to be alive. Tamura was lucky All Might got to him when he did. If not for All Might, Tamura was sure he'd be nothing more than a greasy smear on the pavement, because All for One was going to kill him. If not kill him, then use his body as a Namu vessel. Because of All Might jumping in the nick of time, Tamura was able to get away at least. Getting away was the plan. Upon seeing the unconscious bodies of the UA teachers strewn about the battlefield made Tamura stop for just a second as he realized that with these teachers in the crosshairs, All Might most likely would be forced to hold back so as not to obliterate them off of the map. It took deliberation with himself. It took him nearly running off only to immediately turn back around before Tamura decided. Someone needs to save these idiots so All for One can be put in the ground. So, it was with a heavy heart that Tamura ran back into the battleground. He was nearly blown out of his shoes as All for One and All Might came to such harsh blows that it made the ground quake and the wind blow. Tamura started with the heroes closest to him. He grabbed Midnight from under her arms and started to hull her way. God, he grunted. You weigh a ton. Tamura really should start to work out. He had to drag the unconscious woman all the way to the safest distance, which wasn't exactly easy when two superpowered monsters were trying to kill each other. Now hearing All for One's voice made Tamura look up just in time to see his once mentor rushing at him. Don't be rude, Tamura. All for One's arm sprung back like a spring and Tamura braced for impact. All Might jumped in front of the attack just in time. All Might went sailing past Tamura's head and into a nearby building. And then there were two. All for One slowly floated so he was just above Tamura. Tamura let out a gasp as he looked at All for One. I wish it didn't have to be like this. Tamura, you showed so much promise. Tamura, jump. Loud Cloud's voice echoed all around them, but Tamura just couldn't see where he was coming from. Not that it mattered because Tamura jumped when he was told. A cloud still nearly swept him off of his feet, but it was still cushioned enough that it didn't help as he and Midnight were flown away. Just in time too, because All Might came back and the impact made a boom so loud Tamura was sure they were able to hear it on the other side of Japan. The cloud flew through a busted building, and in that rubble Loud Cloud laid on his stomach. His right leg was pinned by the rubble so he was unable to move. He had sweat running down his face as he brought his gourd away from his mouth. Loud Cloud started to pant as he let the cloud safely dissipate. This isn't the safest place, he whispered. Backup is on the way. But I'm sure you know ... we got to get the others out of there. I would, but... Loud Cloud looked at his pinned leg and then back at Tamura. I hate to ask you to do this. You're just a civilian right now, but you're our only help at getting those heroes out of there. I need you to drag them to a safe enough distance away from the fight and I can sweep you up in a cloud. Can't you do that already? Tamura asked and Loud Cloud shook his head. No, the fight between All for One and All Might is too windy, literally. Those powerful gusts of winds they're making will dissipate my cloud before it could reach the others. We just need Mike, Snipe, and Ectoplasm out of there. Tamura curiously looked down before giving a nod. I can do it, but I have to ask, the others. Eraser, Hawks, Rocklock, what happened to them? Nomus attacked the bar after you've been teleported. Loud Cloud looked away for a moment as he gasped in pain. We don't have much time, Tenko. Yeah, wait, what did you call me? Tenko ... that's your name, isn't it? Shadow looked into you. Looked into every missing person case he could find about a murdered family. Tenko Shimura is the only one that matched the way your family was killed. A small gasp left Tamura Tenko's mouth, as memories of a little sister, a mother, a grandmother, and a dog all flooded his mind after all of these years. It was something that awoke as a memory resurfaced. The memory of a picture. A woman with black hair and in a hero costume who was floating. She's a hero. We should be heroes together, Tenko. Tenko eyebrows furrowed before he nodded firmly. You can count on me, Loud Cloud. Good lad. Loud Cloud gave him a wavering smile. We don't have much time so you have to be quick. I don't know how much longer Yagi can last. He's already looking worse for wear. At that mention made Tenko turn towards the fight. All Might was starting to deflate in size. Something Tamura would have cheered at, but it was something that made Tenko worry. I'll be quick, and with that he went to jump only to realize he didn't exactly have a floating quirk and looking at a 10-foot drop at the least. Thankfully Loud Cloud made a cloud to catch him. Idiot. Oboro laughed, which made Tamura sigh in both relief and embarrassment. Tenko hit the ground and ran full speed towards the closest hero. Snipe was next, so he grabbed Snipe by his wrists and gave the man a powerful tug. I take it back, you're way heavier. He grunted as he painstakingly pulled the massive man along the ground. Tenko was nearly thrown to the ground by gusts of air pressure, but still he persisted in his quest. Once out of the immediate fallout, Tenko's legs were swept under him by a cloud. This man weighs a ton. He grunted when Snipe was placed on the ground. Tenko put his hands on his knees and looked at Oboro. You're doing amazing, kid. 2 more. I know you can do it. Oboro cheered Tenko on and Tenko nodded. A cloud quickly took Tenko back to the battlefield. It was when he was trying to save ectoplasm did things get easier. All for One had picked up on what Tenko was doing and he managed to sweep All Might, who was almost completely shriveled and skeletal. You want to save those heroes so bad. Then you can join them. And he went to throw a spring-loaded punch at Tenko. Tenko once again could only brace for the impact. He was once again saved, only this time he was saved by someone different. Blue flames licked at the ground and made a barrier between Tenko and the spring-loaded punch. The air pressure still knocked Tenko off of his feet, but not as bad as it could have been. Dabai walked calmly up to Tenko, his hands in his filthy jacket pockets. He still had the face mask on and he just looked bored. Nedzu called in a favor. Dabai explained, "What are we doing?" All Might came back and knocked All for One back with a sonic boom of a punch. Jesus. Dabai winced back in shock. "Get that one," Tenko demanded as he pointed to Present Mike. "We need to get them at a safe distance." Dabai nodded and grabbed Present Mike by his ankles. Ectoplasm was much easier to drag than the other two, despite his looks. "I'm surprised the girl isn't with you to rub it in my face," Tenko snarked, and that made Dabai smile a little. "She's with the other hero students watching this all go down. They're all cheering for you, so don't let them down. Go it." "What do you mean?" Dabai pointed up with one finger, and that made Tenko look up to where he was pointing. Above their heads was a helicopter belonging to a news station. A copter that was watching the fight with rapt interest. No doubt one that's been watching Tamura this whole time. All of Japan is watching. So hurry up so All Might can put this fucker in the ground. Dabai picked up his speed while dragging Present Mike, and Tenko did the same. It was pure adrenaline that was keeping Tenko from fainting. That was keeping him from keeling over then and there. He feared that a cloud wouldn't come, but it would. A cloud took all 4 of them away into the safety of the collapsed building. The moment the other heroes were out of the way, All Might didn't let up. His punches became harder and he was able to freely attack All for One. Tenko felt like a kid as he watched this fight. "Come on, All Might," he whispered nervously. "Can't you hear it? How everyone is cheering you on." He continued to whisper as he watched. "Tamura Dabai." Tenko corrected him. "Whatever the fuck your name is, we need to." Tenko heard a snippet of All for One's conversation, taunting of All Might. "Don't you know just who Tamura is?" Tenko shushed Dabai. "Don't shush me," Dabai hissed between clenched teeth in pure irritation. Tenko's eyes narrowed as he spotted the gourd megaphone and he snatched it. "Tenko," Oboro coked. Tenko turned it on and brought it to his mouth. "My name is Tenko Shimura," he called over the megaphone, unsure of what's come over him, but he didn't hate this feeling. "The son of Nao Shimura and Kataro Shimura, who are both dead by your hand. All of my family are." "All Might, shut this prick up. For my family. For my grandmother, who was a motherfucking hero." His voice soared over the terrain and proved just the distraction All Might needed. With all of his mighty power, All Might threw one good and powerful punch and brought All for One to the ground, several layers of it in fact. All was still for several long seconds as Dabai and Tenko just watched with bated breath. Then All Might puffed up into his fullest form with his arm raised high above his head while he panted through his obvious pain. It was a childish joy that filled Tenko with glee as he watched this. He could hear it, the applause of everyone, every cheer, every tear shed of relief. He wondered if Toga was surrounded by the girls in the dorms. All of those teenagers grabbing onto one another for dear life as they watched this happen, watching as their favorite hero lived to see another day. Dabai grunted. "Help me get this rock off of Loud Cloud," he demanded, and Tenko looked over to see that Loud Cloud had passed out at some point. The two of them worked together to lift the massive rubble off of Loud Cloud's leg. No easy feat, but it could be done. Once it was off of him, they flipped him over and were both relieved to see he was breathing. Then it was over. Cleanup was to be done. All Might refused an interview and just left once everyone was loaded up into ambulances. Still, All Might didn't leave without patting Tenko on the shoulder. "You would have made your grandmother proud. These heroes will all live to see another day because of you. Remember that," he told Tenko before leaving. Still, Tenko knew that it wasn't over even if All for One was captured. He looked over his shoulder upon feeling eyes on him, or rather eye on him. Naiz was standing up top a building looking down at Tenko. His hatred could be felt from high above. Tenko grabbed Dabai's jacket sleeve. "Quit it," Dabai hissed before he looked at Tenko and then followed Tenko's gaze. His scowled. The two of them stared at Naiz. Naiz's right eye was shut as he stared below. Kurogiri came up behind Naiz and put 2 hands on Naiz's shoulders. Then behind a violently orange portal the two of them left. "It's not the end," Tenko told Dabai. "Not until Naiz is killed. Then next time we have a run-in with that thing, there will be no high station on my part. I'll toast the fucker alive." Tenko scratched at his neck. "Right." Izuku's eyes snapped open as he looked around. He wasn't in the alleyway. No, he was in purgatory. He looked down at his hands, yes hands, and groaned before grabbing his head. Slowly he sat up and looked around at the tall building top. It was quiet and the sky was still that beautiful orange he's come to love. Something's wrong. No sooner had the thought crossed his mind than his hair suddenly grabbed. Izuku let out a cry as he was suddenly being dragged. I'm tired of this, Nais hissed. This cat and mouse game between us. So it ends here. I realized why this place was made. This is the one place where you can't regenerate. I'm willing to bet. Izuku kicked as he tried to dig his heels into the ground. An involuntary scream left his mouth as he desperately kicked at the ground. His hands flew to Nais's cold wrists to try and pry the Namu out of his hair. He's going to throw me off of the edge, Izuku fearfully realized as he tried to thrash out of Nais's grip. There can only be one of us. I'm the real Izuku Midoriya, Nais declared as he tightened his grip in Izuku's curls. You're the Nais. You're the faker, not me. Izuku knew he only had seconds, but the wall. What happened to the wall? He got stronger like he warned me he would. And he was strong. Nais was strong enough to drag Izuku across the roof and didn't even look like he was breaking out in a sweat. If you kill me, you won't get my quirk. Izuku immediately tried to argue, and this did slow Nais down just a bit, but it didn't stop him completely. Right, with Dad incarcerated, Nais's body shook before he let out a scream of rage and he threw Izuku to the ground. Damn it, he cursed. Izuku let out a whine as he looked at the concrete of the roof. His head stung from where Nais had clearly ripped out a good bit of hair. Izuku shook violently as he looked from the concrete to Nais. Nais had his right eye closed and Izuku knew why instantly. Because he was missing his eye. Nais started to pace back and forth in his ever-growing anger. It's not fair. Nais roared in indignation as he clenched his fingers like he wanted to strangle someone. Dad's been taken and Timura turned against me ... Nais's breathing turned erratic as he grasped his own hair and twisted his curls into knots. All I have is Kurogiri, he whispered before he leaned down and let out soft laughter. Laughter that quickly turned to tears. I don't understand ... Why does everyone leave me? Nais cried. What did I do? He looked at Izuku like he expected Izuku to know the answer. Well, Izuku did, but he wasn't sure if the answer was what Nais really wanted to hear. Izuku was sure saying something along the lines of, oh, you only threaten anybody and everybody in your path, bit my head off literally, kidnapped Itoshi and Gyro, took Gyro's quirk, and you're just batshit crazy, as well as a walking abomination. Would most likely get him tossed off the side of the building. So, instead he just bit his tongue. He had to be smart about this. He needed time to heal fully so he could escape purgatory. I don't know, he whispered. Bullshit, Nais cursed while he continued to pace, not once taking his eyes off of Izuku. And what's worse, they took Itoshi before he was finished. I tried to tell the heroes not to take him. I tried. We don't know if the transfer was complete. Izuku's brows suddenly furrowed. Transfer. You were going to take his quirk. Now it made sense. Hitoshi's last warning to Moss before he went quiet. Izuku felt himself snarl at Nais in anger, but then he relaxed a bit. It wasn't successful, so there's no point getting angry right now, right? Nais surprisingly laughed. Oh, no, well, yes, but no. You see, my transfer was successful. Izuku's eyes widened. Why do you think I'm here? Nais tapped his temple before sticking his tongue. I was able to bypass that stupid wall with ease because of your connection with Hitoshi. His transfer was because I wasn't about to leave my best friend quirkless. The noise that left Izuku's mouth was feral as he sprung to his feet. How dare you? He roared as he lunged at Nais, catching the Namu off guard. Nais didn't have time to react when Izuku grabbed him by the collar and started to push him back towards the edge. You want to know why everybody hates you? Izuku had strength he never knew was in him as he managed to overpower Nais. Because you're not human. You don't act human. You're an abomination. Izuku had Nais on the edge and Nais latched onto Izuku's shoulders, his nails creating small divots into Izuku's skin. Itoshi was never your friend. He was never yours either. He doesn't love you. He loves Moss. Yeah, here's what you don't understand. Nais, you're right. I'm not Izuku Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya died the day he jumped from the building. I am Moss. Izuku let go of Nais, but Nais, who had himself attached to Izuku, still brought Izuku down with him. For a moment the two of them were weightless as they looked down at the ground that was coming up to meet them and fast. Izuku let out a scream as he braced for impact. Izuku let out a gasp and jumped from his spot from the alley. Quickly he looked around and realized, I'm back. He was a cat again and out of purgatory. Talk about the nick of time. He scratched behind his ear with his hind leg. Oh, you're awake. Angel stretched herself out, dipping her upper body low and bringing her rump high. Came back faster than last time. Can you walk? She asked. Izuku did a quick walk, walking around her just to prove a point. Angel watched him before she shook her head. When did you get bigger than me? That's just unfair, you know. She tapped his nose with her tail. Izuku really never even thought about it as he looked at her. Yes, he had become bigger than her in the time that passed between their last visit with one another. Ragdolls. She rolled her eyes playfully before she jumped to a trash can. Well, see you around, Angel told him. Angel, do I know you? Izuku asked, and that made Angel stop. She looked at him. Of course, you know me, Kit. Then she was gone. Jumped from the trash can to a fire escape and soon out of sight. You're a weird cat, Angel, Izuku mumbled as he stared at where she vanished from for a small while. When a splash of water hit his nose, it made him scrunch his nose up and realize just how dark the sky was. Then came the downpour. Yeah, Izuku tusked his tongue in irritation. That tracks. His ears went low. Hang on, Hitoshi. I'm coming. We'll figure out what to do next, together. And in the pouring rain, Izuku rushed for the nearest hospital. It was going to be a bit, but he was going to get there. His best friend was going to need him. Izuku would find the hospital and he would slip by the staff. The hospital was quiet as it was nearly 4 in the morning now. The chaos, for now, was over. It wasn't hard to get up to the floor he needed to be in where Hitoshi would be. Izuku went up to the floor and looked for Hitoshi's name. It would be a while, but he would find the door labeled Shinsu. The door was wide open and Izuku was ready to step in, but he stopped when he heard Aburo's voice. I warned you, Shouta. I told you not to bring Moss on the camping trip. Izuku stopped and peered inside of the room. Aburo was in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast as he rolled around. He sounded upset, which was unheard of for Aburo. Shouta had his head down and his arms crossed. He looked downcast. Azashi was sitting on the edge of Hitoshi's bed and running his fingers through Hitoshi's hair. Hitoshi's hair was weird. It was straight, but Izuku was sure it would bounce back soon. I didn't think it would be a problem, Shouta tried to defend himself, but Aburo wasn't having it. The campsite was supposed to be a secret. I know you didn't. We knew Naiz was after Hitoshi. We knew this. It was pure negligence on not just your part but all of our part to allow Moss to come. We all know Moss and Naiz have a connection. It's how Naiz found Itoshi in the first place. It might not be the case, Hazashi argued, which made Aburo huff a little. We could suspect a traitor amongst one of the two classes. Aburo rolled his eyes. Maybe Aburo is right and maybe Hazashi is right. It's hard to say. Shouta finally spoke after a while. Look, I don't want to suggest this. I really don't, but maybe we should consider getting rid of Moss. Izuku's ears low as Aburo said this. Shouta rolled his eyes this time. Good luck with that, Aburo. Did you forget that Moss is part human? That he's as smart as Netsu? He's not going to let us get rid of him, and Hitoshi sure as hell isn't going to let it happen. Look at Hitoshi. Aburo yelled desperately as pointed to Hitoshi. Hitoshi was still catatonic, his eyes open but unmoving. He was just sitting there, looking dead if it wasn't for the heart monitor. The room started to mist up as Aburo's quirk activated, but Shouta was quick to turn Aburo's quirk off with a stare. Calm down, Shouta demanded and put his hands over his chest. You're causing the room to fog, Aburo. I know you're upset. No, I was upset when Hitoshi was hunted like an animal after going to the movies with his friends. I was upset when Hitoshi had his face sliced open by knives during the internships. I'm furious. If it wasn't for Moss, we wouldn't have known Hitoshi who had taken Hitoshi. You know this, Hazashi said, and Aburo looked at him and then at Shouta. But, Shouta said softly, I agree. We couldn't keep having moments like this. I think it's time to restrict Hitoshi and Moss's contact. Thank you, Aburo sighed. I can't do this again. We nearly lost Hitoshi. Who knows what hell Naiz put him through? Izuku just stood there as the adults changed the subject. Was it because of him that Naiz was able to find Hitoshi in the woods? Was it all his fault? Was he hurting his best friend by always being around Hitoshi? Izuku felt tears collect in his eyes before he turned and ran from the room. Never, 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 he told himself as he ran as fast as he could down the hall. He thought about all the times he and Hitoshi hung out. All of those nights. Was it really because of him that Naiz was able to track Hitoshi down and take not just Hitoshi's quirk but Gyro's as well? Yes, the mindlink hijack happened, but they hadn't used it to talk about the camp unless Naiz somehow advanced and managed to see it for his own eyes. Izuku didn't know. He didn't know, and that's what was killing him. He never wanted to be the reason Hitoshi was in danger. The moment he was outside of the hospital, Izuku looked at himself in a nearby puddle. The GoPro was still around his neck. It wasn't hard for him to wriggle the collar off of himself. He held the collar in his mouth and tossed it away from him once he was done. Then he looked at himself one more time. Izuku stared at himself before huffing. It's the only way, isn't it? He asked himself while sitting down. It was with a heavy sigh did Izuku slowly stand. Hitoshi's blank catatonic face stared back in Izuku's mind. Hitoshi ... who has basically been with Izuku since the start. Hitoshi, Izuku's best friend through thick and thin. And Izuku basically hurt him. He should have known better than to have gone to the camp. He knew he and Naiz had the connection. Izuku splashed his own reflection. I will never put Hitoshi in danger again, he decided, and Izuku turned away from the hospital as thunder rolled off in the distance. Never again. I'm going to keep you safe, Hitoshi. I promise. Izuku gave the hospital one last look. I promise. It would take a few days for Hitoshi to come out of his catatonic state. First he blinked and then his face became confused as everything came into focus. His brow furrowed and he looked around before he rubbed his eyes like he had just woken up. He blinked several times and then looked around the room. All of his dads were asleep. Oboro had a boot on one of his legs as he slept in a chair. Hazashi was curled up in another chair closest to Hitoshi and Shouto was laying in a sleeping bag propped against the wall. Hitoshi looked around for anything to tell the time but he couldn't see anything as such. What happened? There was. Nice and ... It was my birthday. Itoshi tried to rack his brain for his missing memories, but they weren't there. He was coming up blank, at least for now. Itoshi let out a soft noise as he looked around the room some more. Where's Moss? Izuku. Itoshi tried the link, but it was silent. I'm the real Izuku. Me, not some cat. The image of Nai screaming in Hitoshi's face etched itself into Hitoshi's mind. Hitoshi shivered as he remembered a piece of cake being smashed into his face as Nai's grew increasingly aggressive until he was pulled back by Kurogiri. Hitoshi blinked several times as the memory replayed as he tried to figure out what happened next. Boss, he tried again with the link but he did not respond. Something didn't feel right. Hitoshi's head hurt when he leaned forward. Something touched his shoulders and he nearly jumped until he realized it was his own hair. His hair was ... flat. A noise left Hitoshi's mouth as he went to move his hair back, but it just moved with gravity and went right back in front of his eyes. He sat up and shook his head to move his hair back. This worked. Mossy. He tried again. Nothing. It was like the connection wasn't there anymore. A feeling of dread suddenly washed over Hitoshi as he started to shake. We ate cake and then I met his father. I was in front of All for One. Monoma's grandfather, Izuku's father. Nai's acted differently around All for One, more subdued. Then what happened? Hitoshi scratched at his hair and winced a little as he wasn't used to his hair being down and around him. Hitoshi. Hazashi was the first to wake. He bounced up immediately and nearly got himself caught in the chair. Dad, Hitoshi whispered and Hazashi hugged him tightly. What happened? He asked and his own voice felt strangely foreign to him as Hazashi hugged him. Hitoshi felt tears perk in his eyes as he was rocked back and forth by Hazashi. We were hoping you could fill us in. Hazashi pulled Hitoshi back to look him in the eye. Hitoshi looked at Hazashi. I remember some things but ... not everything. He admitted shamefully as he couldn't look Hazashi in the eye. He grabbed onto the blanket that was laying on him and shook his head. Hazashi sat on the edge of the bed and he was gentle as he cupped Hitoshi's cheek. He gently caressed the hill of Hitoshi's cheek with his thumb. Hitoshi shook as he sucked in a breath. I was so scared, he admitted shamefully as he shook his head. I remember just wanting you and Dad and Papa. Nice is crazy. Hazashi crouched down to the side of the bed. He took both of Hitoshi's hands in his own and ran his thumbs over Hitoshi's knuckles. You're safe now, he reassured Hitoshi and he gently tucked some hair behind Hitoshi's ear. Hitoshi shook a little but he looked at his lap. Thank you, Hitoshi's mouth turned into a frown as he tried to remember what happened after meeting All for One. I saw him, Dad. All for One, Izuku's father, Nai's creator. Hazashi frowned. All for One, his eyes had a gleam in them as he stood and gently rubbed his hand along his mouth. Yeah, we met him as well. I'm sure that was him that tried to stop us from rescuing you. Hazashi explained. I never felt so afraid and I can't imagine how terrified you must have been facing him. Did you fight him? Hitoshi asked and Hazashi nodded. Hitoshi shook his head. For one, I was bound to a rolly chair. 2, I was too terrified to move so much as fight back. Hitoshi explained. Good. The last thing our hearts need is learning that All for One is after you next. Hazashi smiled weakly. Not that he will. He got arrested. A small weight has been lifted from Hitoshi's shoulders. Granted, he would feel a lot better if Nai's had been the one arrested, but he'll take this small victory. Hazashi ran his fingers through Hitoshi's hair and looked worried. How are you feeling? I would feel better if I could just fill in the blanks, you know. Hitoshi whispered nervously. Something is missing. I just don't know what. He then looks at his hand and Hazashi pull him into a hug. It's going to be okay, kiddo. We're going to help you fill in those missing gaps and figure out what's missing. Okay. Hitoshi leaned against Hazashi. Dad, Hazashi rested his head cheek on Hitoshi's head. Yes, Hitoshi. Have you seen Moss? It was like the moment Hitoshi saw Jiru the next morning and noted her quirk missing did everything came flooding back to him. That missing piece. His quirk. Nai's took his quirk. The shock was quick and fast. Not as shocking as when he learned that All Might was going to retire because his fight with All for One was just too much the fight that Hitoshi. The anger and rage Hitoshi felt it was there, but Hitoshi, for the time being, put a cap on it. He just put a cap on everything. As he retold his story to countless heroes and officers and even his stupid DCFS worker, he was Hitoshi Shinzu. Masking and pretending everything was fine was just par for the course. When he didn't want to tell his story anymore, he just put a stupid little cap on it. He was fine. He was going to be okay. Of course it didn't help when Moss never showed back up. Nedzu hadn't seen him. And when they went looking, all that could be found was the collar he was wearing, and that was found outside of the hospital. Was Itoshi upset? Of course. His cat was missing. His best friend. But Moss is a smart cat. He reasoned with himself, and so he squashed those feelings down. It's all he could do. He squashed them down far and put a cap on it because Moss was a smart cat and it would be illogical to worry about him. Well, he was worrying because Nise was still after Moss, but Itoshi had a feeling it wasn't that. People came to visit him. Classmates tearfully hugged him, apologizing for not realizing he and Jiru were missing until it was too late. Itoshi never blamed them. Jiru was a little more reserved. Not really towards her classmates, but she needed to be alone. Even when Itoshi tried to approach, she just asked to be alone. He respected her wishes and let her be. Itoshi tried to be a little more reserved, hoping his classmates would get the hint, but it didn't work. But that was okay. It was all going to be okay. That's all he could tell himself. By the time Hitoshi and Jiru returned to the dorms, Hitoshi's hair still hadn't sprung back up. It's the weirdest thing. Still, Hitoshi threw it in a ponytail well. He threw it into a ponytail. The girl was really good at that. He's come to find out. Okay, I was kidnapped, but it's not a big deal. My best friend is missing, but I'm sure he'll show up. He's smart, and I no longer have a quirk ... but I never. His breath hitched a little as he looked at the dorms, but very quickly he put a cap on it. I didn't like my quirk anyways. Hitoshi swallowed hard. Jiru stepped up to him and she looked at him before bumping her shoulder into his. You good? She asked him. I know I probably hasn't been easy. Fine. He cut her off before turning towards the dorms. I'm perfectly fine, but thank you for asking. He couldn't look at her. Okay, I know it hasn't been easy for me, you know. I never thought I'd lose my quirk, she whispered, and Hitoshi frowned but corrected his face. I know what you mean, he told her, but I'm going to be okay. I have to be. And without another word he marched forward. The welcome back to the dorm was as expected. People either just didn't look at him as they didn't want to make a scene, or they rushed and hugged both him and Jiru. It was one or the other. Momo hugged Jiru tightly while Nito nearly sent Hitoshi careening over the common room couch in a leap that would make their dance instructor proud. It was a nice moment. A moment that, when Hitoshi was back on his feet, would change when Denki spoke. Yo, we heard about Moss. Don't worry, my guy. We've made flyers. And Denki showed one of the flyers to Hitoshi. It was a "Have you seen this cat?" flyer. It was a picture of Moss. Moss was sitting on Hitoshi's shoulder, but Hitoshi had been cropped out. Moss rubbed against Hitoshi's chin, his eyes closed, but that didn't matter. Moss was unique enough that anybody should spot him without his eye color. Under the picture was Moss's coloring, eyes, and type. He'll be found in no time, I'm sure. Hitoshi felt his smile wobble, but he corrected it. That's great, Denki, he said, but I'm sure it's not needed. Moss is a smart cat. He'll find his way back eventually. Denki's smile dropped a little. You really think so? I mean, shouldn't he be back already if that were the case? I'm sure he just needs space. I wouldn't know. I don't have the link anymore. You're being a little too chill about this, man. I mean, with everything that happened. Still, Hitoshi was done with this conversation as he started for his room, not allowing Denki to finish. Anyway, I'm gonna go to my room for a bit. I'll be out later. He waved bye to everyone without looking back. Hitoshi, Momo called to him, and he paused his walking to let her know she had his attention. Are you okay? Of course I am, he said in a soft voice before walking away with his hands in his pockets and his head down. He heard someone, Bakugo by the gruff in his voice, say just before he vanished into the elevator. I give him 2 days before he cracks. Cracks? No, he was fine. He was going to be okay. He had to be. Hitoshi walked to his dorm and he bent down before picking up a rock. It was a shiny deep aqua blue pebble that was smooth to the touch. It was shiny with flecks of gold strewn throughout it. He looked it over before looking around. Mine now. It was a shiny rock and it was in front of his door. Hitoshi opened his door and quietly shut it. He put his new rock on the nightstand. Moss, he called on instinct but shut his mouth. He's fine. He's a smart and fast cat. He's fine, Hitoshi reminded himself. Hitoshi laid on his bed and got a bit of a shock when his ponytail pushed up against his head, something he wasn't used to. I just gotta relax, he said as he tried to lay down. Tried to relax, but he wouldn't. He couldn't. He would twist and turn, but relaxation would never come. He would manage to doze off, but Nise's face would appear in front of his eyes every time Hitoshi tried, making sleep almost impossible. Hitoshi needed to do something. That's what he needed to do to get his mind off of everything that happened. He didn't want to deal with everyone, and it wouldn't be until later into the night, around 3 in the morning, would he sneak out of his bedroom with a makeup bag in his hands. This was just what he needed. A makeover, some control, something to help him relax. Hitoshi went into the bathroom downstairs. Despite having a bathroom in his room, he liked using this one for its bigger mirror. It was so quiet in the dorms at 3 in the morning. No one was running around, no yelling, just pure silence. Itoshi opened his makeup bag and he got to work. He got lost in his makeup as it gave him something to do, something to take his mind off of everything. It was nice, but when he finished was when the house of cards he built for himself came tumbling down. He stared at his reflection, happy for his face full of makeup and how it made him look and feel. He looked at himself and he smiled. That was when the first tear escaped his eyes. Itoshi sniffled as the tear made a watery black streak down the curve of his cheek. He wiped it away, but the damage was done. Itoshi looked down at the sink as his lower lip quivered, but he quickly straightened it and looked at himself in the mirror again with another big smile, but it didn't stop as more tears started to stream down his cheeks, leaving dark trails in their wake. His whole body started to shake as his smile twisted into a sickly grimace. His eyes started to sting from the makeup getting into them, and with a shaky hand he grabbed a round cotton pad from his bag. No micellar water, as he figured his own tears would be enough to remove the makeup. All he did was successfully smear his eyeliner and mascara down his face and around his eyes as he stared at himself in the mirror. This was making him look like a raccoon as he made dark smudges all around his eyes. Itoshi put his hands on the sink as he just stared at the sink. A choked sob left his mouth as the cap came off. His sobs were panicked and loud. Once the dam broke, he couldn't put it back together as he let out sobs that echoed around the whole of the boys' bathroom. Itoshi was sad, and he was upset more than anything. He was angry as he threw his hands into his hair and just started to scratch his nails against his scalp when he gripped his newfound straightened hair tightly. Itoshi took one look at himself in the mirror. He didn't recognize himself. That wasn't him. That wasn't. Itoshi had no memory of breaking the mirror with his fist. One moment he was looking at his reflection, and the next thing he knew there was a crack that had webbed out along the large mirror with his fist right in the center. Blood welled from his busted knuckles and slowly trickled down his arm, but Itoshi didn't remove his fist. If you hadn't been so weak, none of this would have happened. What happened to having a powerful quirk? Huh? He yelled at his broken reflection. It's your fault. And now Moss is gone, and it's because of you. Where is Moss? Is he okay? Does Nice have him? Itoshi almost completely panicked. Where is he? This isn't like him, and he probably doesn't know I've lost my quirk. Where is he? Moss. Izuku. Itoshi tried the link, but he knew it was long gone. That's enough of that. Takoyami was completely silent. So silent that Itoshi didn't even know that his friend had walked into the bathroom to see Itoshi in such a disarrayed state. Itoshi turned in shock, but Takoyami didn't seem surprised as he just helped remove Hitoshi's fist from the mirror. I had an inkling that you were holding on too tightly to your negative emotions, Takoyami said as he inspected Hitoshi's fist. Itoshi shook his head and tried to pull away. You shouldn't, I'm Finn. If you say you're fine one more time, I'm going to have Dark Shadow pop you, Takoyami huffed at Hitoshi. You're clearly not. Nobody would be fine after going through what you've been through. Hitoshi looked down and wiped his greasy makeup-covered face. I'm sorry, he whispered. Don't apologize, come. Takoyami kept a hold on Hitoshi's hand and led him away. I think there's a first aid kit in the common room, he stated softly, and Itoshi allowed himself to be walked out of the bathroom and into the common room without a fight. Takoyami sat Hitoshi on the couch. Takoyami didn't ask Hitoshi to open up, didn't even speak as he helped bandage Hitoshi's damaged hand. Still, when Takoyami was almost finished, Hitoshi spoke about it. It shouldn't have happened. Knives ambushed us during the Walk of Courage. My quirk was strong, I could have stopped him, but I was so stunned. And now, All Might is retiring, and Hitoshi wrapped his arms around his legs and buried his tear-stained face into his knees. I have no idea where Moss is. Knives is still out there. I am scared. He whined like a child. Takoyami patted Hitoshi on the back. His touch was nice and helped ground Hitoshi, if only a little. It's only natural to feel that way, Takoyami said. The shadows hold many things, and it's only unfortunate that Knives is one of those things. But you can rest assured that while I am still here, that Knives will not get his hands on you again. Well, it's nice. You can't promise that, Takoyami. Hitoshi sniffled and looked at his friend. Takoyami was gentle as he helped wipe a tear from Hitoshi's face. I can and I will. If Knives wants you, he's going to have to go through Dark Shadow and myself. No easy feat. I can promise you that much. Dark Shadow bristled as she covered Takoyami's arms, and then she covered his face like a hood, and Hitoshi could only look at the display with a bit of awe. Thank you, Takoyami. Itoshi uncurled himself from the couch and gave his friend a kind smile before grabbing Takoyami's hands. I appreciate this, but now I have another task I must do, and I request your help, Hitoshi said as Dark Shadow retreated. Oh, and what's that? For a moment Hitoshi's eyes seemed to glow with newfound anger. Or was it something else? A newfound vigor, perhaps. I have a cat to find. Bonus. It's not the best, but it's all I could do on such short notice. Dr. Garaki grunted as he backed away from Izuku. Izuku sat there staring numbly at the floor, a new eye reattached in lieu of the one Tamura took out. This eye wasn't green. Oh no, Izuku's other eye was too damaged to be put back in. Izuku looked at himself in the mirror. His eye was pink of all colors. It didn't belong, and it showed as the pupil didn't even match with this one having a goat-like pupil. Izuku reached a finger up to touch it but quickly hissed as he looked away. "Thanks, doctor. I know you did all you could," Izuku hissed as he stood from the operating table. He started to grab a coat and the good doctor cleared his throat. "And just where are you going?" "I have a business to attend. It's best to stay indoors so nobody can recognize you. Your father didn't sacrifice himself for nothing, you know." The doctor scolded Izuku, and it made Izuku pause before putting his coat on. "Unless you need to be fixed." "Doctor, what time is it?" Izuku innocently asked. The time Dr. Garaki fell under, his eyes going white and his jaw slaking. Izuku looked over at the doctor and smiled. "Dad's not here, is he?" "No, I think it's time for this place to go under new management." Izuku smiled as he clapped his hands. "As his son, it's only natural that I'm next in line, right, doctor?" "Don't answer, we both know it's yes. So, rule number 1." Izuku leaned down and smiled, showing off his sharp teeth. "No more fixing me, doctor, or you'll be the next one to be fixed. Understand?" The doctor slowly nodded and Izuku clapped his hands yet again. "Excellent. Oh, I'm going to make so many great changes. Let's start with." Izuku looked down at the Nomus laying in their tanks ready to be taken out, ready to live again. "This one." He touched the tank. "You've done great work, yes, but I think with my insight we can make it better." It started out okay for Izuku, being on his own, that is. It was lonely, yeah, and it wasn't exactly luxurious either, but he was surviving. Izuku lost track of how many days it's been. It's hard to really tell when he couldn't exactly tell time as a cat. He could look at the sun, but really, it's hard to say. The days just started to muddle together. Izuku opened his eyes and looked up at the sky. He had no idea the day nor the time. He had decided to take a midday nap, which may have turned into a midday sleep as it was now nighttime shown by the sky. Izuku stretched himself out with his rump up in the air. Then when he was done he gave his ear a scratch. He had napped in front of a large business building hiding in the bushes by the building. He looked out at the sleeping city of Musutafu. Izuku tried to wipe the sleepiness from his eyes before he gave himself one good and powerful shake. He sucked in a deep breath before jumping down towards the sidewalk. He didn't know where he was going today. To be fair, he didn't know where he was going to go when he left days, maybe even weeks ago. He was just existing. Though, it didn't feel like much of an existence as of late. Izuku looked at all the buildings, all the businesses that were shut down for the night. The city was so quiet it was rather nice. Izuku trotted through the city and he started to slow a bit as things were starting to look familiar. "I've been here before," he realized, while he stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "Yeah." He looked at all the buildings and his ears perked high. "I know this place. He took off in a run suddenly. If I turn this corner then I should be near that small store. The one that banned me." He seemed almost excited. It felt like forever ago. Was he just a tiny thing stealing food for Itoshi and Eri? He wondered how they were. Quickly he shook his head as he kept running. He turned the corner and it was like he was blasted back into time. It was only a year, maybe 2, ago he was stealing from the store, but again ... It felt like a whole lifetime has passed. Everything was where he last remembered it. Izuku trotted quickly down the sidewalk as he looked around. He looked at the corner store where he had stolen from many times in the past. The sign was still there. It made him chuckle that after all this time the owners were still wary of him. I wonder if that school is still up or if they tore it down. Since he was going down memory lane, he just started to walk toward the old school. The school that nearly killed Itoshi and Eri. That mold. Izuku was just glad that Itoshi and Eri made it out of there safely. He hoped Itoshi was safe and awake. Would he be awake by now? Izuku didn't know, and it left him worried for his friend. Izuku looked at his paws. Maybe I should go back. Knives and moss have a connection. Abaro's shout returned into Izuku's mind full force. Look at Itoshi. We can't have this happen again. Izuku knew he was doing the right thing. He had to do this, for Hitoshi's sake. He wasn't going to let Hitoshi get hurt because of him. Knives won't be able to track Hitoshi anymore. Izuku stopped walking and just slowly looked up. He had made it back to the school, only ... It was gone. They demolished it some time ago, as all that was left is an empty lot. Izuku sat in front of the lot and just took it all in. Well ... I guess I should start looking for food, Izuku thought to himself as he got up. Izuku turned towards the voice and blinked as a brown tabby with dark brown stripes and white paws approached him. For a moment he didn't recognize this tabby. The poor thing was missing her right eye and ear, and she was scared horribly all over as if she were mauled. Then it struck Izuku just who he was looking at when he looked into her yellow eye. "Adoli?" he asked in alarm. "Well, you do remember me. I have to say, you've gotten bigger." She sat next to him. Her tail was ... Her tail looked to be chopped in half. "I know. I look horrible." Adoli looked away from him. "What happened?" he whispered. "I talked to Brian and he said you were adopted." "Brian?" Adoli's one good ear perked at the mention of Brian's name. "He's alive." "That's good. As for your question, the humans that adopted me, They were dog fighters. She looked at her paws. I was bait for the dogs. Adelie bristled at the memory. It was awful. I don't think I should be alive, but ... here I am. She said, I have the gang to thank. The gang. If Izuku had eyebrows, he'd be raising them. Like ... the other cats from before. They're all okay. Adelie shrugged. Some, though most of us dispersed. Only a small bit of us hang around. But it's better than being alone, she said, and then turned to look at him. What are you doing out here anyways? I know you have a home to go to, right? This time Izuku shrugged. It's a long story. Humans are trash, Adelie hissed, making Izuku look at her in surprise. All of them, it seems. Oh, not Itoshi. I can't really explain it. Adelie looked at him again. You don't need to defend them any longer. Izuku looked away from her. You mentioned a gang. Yes, well, I have no doubt you'd fit, and it's not up to me. It's up to our leader. She doesn't just allow anyone in. She's a great leader, don't get me wrong, but she doesn't want to risk harm to anyone by just letting in outsiders. But I think you and she will get along fine. Adelie stood and stretched her body out. That is, if you want to try and join, that is. It was pure curiosity and loneliness that made Izuku nod. I have nowhere else to go, he would say, and Adelie nodded. That's what I assumed. Come. She started to walk and Izuku followed obediently. I have to say, you've gotten quite big since I last saw you, Adelie said softly. Bigger than me. I've heard that. Izuku smiled at her while trotting along. So ... this leader, what should I expect? He inquired seconds later. I wish I could tell you. She's, I don't know, an enigma, he asked, causing Adelie to look at him in confusion, as it was clear that word wasn't in her vocabulary. She's mysterious, Adelie said. She just knows what she wants, and she's wicked smart to boot. I once saw her free a dog to distract a merchant so she could steal his food. Izuku thought. They turned down into an alleyway where instantly there were cats laying on trash cans. The cats perked and jumped down. Who is this, Adelie? One cat, a brown tabby like Adelie, only male, asked in a weary voice. This is Moss. He helped me out a while back. His humans abandoned him and he wants to join us. He doesn't look like a normal cat. The second cat, another Tom, asked. This one is an orange cat like Pumpkin, but more lithe and less muscular. He's green. Yes, I have one functioning eyeball, Adelie hissed. But he's useful. I think I should be the one to decide that. A new, more commanding voice spoke, and all the cats turned towards it. A female cat was standing in the alley now, and there were a few others lingering behind her but not getting too close as they watched Moss warily. This cat wasn't wary, quite the opposite in fact, as she stared at him with an unwavering stare. There was something familiar about this cat, something Izuku couldn't place. It was like he knew her, but he would have remembered a cat like her if that was the case. She was like him in that she was big in size. She was also fluffy like him. She could easily be mistaken as a chubby cat, but Izuku knew from experience that it was all fur. She was a gravy tabby with smatterings of white mostly prominent on her chest and her paws. What really stuck out was her face, as she had an orange patch amongst the gray that stretched along her eyes and nose like a birthmark. It was the only patch of orange that Izuku could see. Izuku knew her ... but he didn't, and it showed when he asked, Who are you? You may call me Muffin, if you wish. Come here, she demanded, and Izuku really didn't question it as he stood and approached her with a trot. Muffin, it's nice to meet you, Izuku started while he got closer to her. He saw her eyes were mint green, and that's about as much as he was able to see before she attacked. Her attack was quick as she tackled him to the ground, using her hind legs to kick and push him to the side. Izuku let out a yowl of surprise as the two of them tussled. Izuku felt teeth grab him by his face, and he was quick to start kicking Muffin in her middle, bunny kicking as fast and as hard as he could. Muffin and Izuku twisted around along the ground in this fight. Somehow they ended with their bodies away from one another, but she still had a grip on his neck and was shaking her head from side to side like she was trying to break his neck. Izuku had to twist his body, and he put his foot on her head and with one powerful kick and managed to kick Muffin off of him. The two of them fell away from one another, and Izuku let out a warning yowl and got on his toes, and his fur bristled. Izuku panted heavily as he looked at Muffin. Muffin looked unbothered as she lapped at her tail. Not bad. Despite clearly being a pet, you're quick on your feet. Is it that obvious? Izuku wondered out loud, and Muffin scoffed. Your fur isn't matted. You've been brushed. Not only that, but you still smell like humans. Too much like them. Izuku thought back to Itoshi and how Itoshi did often like to brush him, but Kota also liked to help brush Izuku as well. You're also fat. Hey, Izuku gasped in indignation. Lay off the treats. Muffin rolled her eyes as she walked by him, and Izuku pouted before looking down at his stomach. Was he really heavy? Yeah, he liked a treat every now and again, and Itoshi did often give in if Izuku asked for one. Muffin looked back at Izuku. So they were now close, and Izuku saw that they were the exact same height. How exactly do you plan on helping our little gang? I don't like slackers. You do your part and carry your own weight, which is a lot. I'm not fat, and you'll fit in around here. If you plan on lazing about like a house cat, then you can go. Izuku snorted at Muffin. What do you need me to do? he demanded, and Muffin seemed to purr a little at this. How good can you hunt, house cat? Izuku corrected her. He was tempted to tell her he was called Moss, but Moss was for Itoshi, and Itoshi wasn't here, was he? You can call me Izuku. Muffin looked confused. Izuku ... That's not what I expected. Muffin hummed, but still she looked at the other cats. There were suddenly a lot more. Some Izuku did recognize the cats from a year or two back, but most he didn't know. There were at least. He paused and counted each cat he could see. 14 cats, counting yourself. I suppose I know why you're asking about hunting. 14 mouths to feed and our supplies are dwindling, Muffin said as she trotted around Izuku. Bring back some food and you'll secure a place in our little gang. Izuku's ears perked. I can do that. There's a catch. Enough food to feed all of us. Seeing how Italy talks so highly of you, I'm sure that won't be an issue. Will it, Izuku? Muffin asked as she sat down. Izuku's eyes narrowed a little, but he was never one to shy away from a challenge. No, it won't be. Good. You know where to find us. Go on now. Izuku looked at all the other cats. Italy looked away from him nervously, unable to meet his eyes. Izuku then shrugged and took off. I'll get your food, he told them, and looked back at Muffin. Just you wait. And he bounded out of the alleyway. Enough food to feed 14 cats, he thought while trotting down the sidewalk. I'd be hunting all night to catch that many rats. No, work smarter not harder, Izuku, he thought while looking around. Muffin was like Aizawa in a way. She wanted to know Izuku's worth, basically, where he'd stand. After all, she said it herself. She doesn't want a lazy house cat. Fine. Izuku was going to show her. 14 cats. I need something big. It was like God was shining down upon Izuku. If God was the yellow lights off Izuku's old friend, the grocery store he's stolen from before, and a light bulb went off over Izuku's head. He wasn't Moss. He wasn't a house cat anymore. So, he walked in front of the automatic doors and the doors opened wide. He already knew what he was going to take. Only one thing would be perfect for 14 cats. It was the sound of dragging that made Muffin and the others perk their ears up. Immediately several cats got ready for a fight if needed, but Muffin didn't give the word as they waited to see what was approaching. First they saw a shadow. The massive shadow of a cat illuminated by the street lights. The shadow would slowly shrink as the cat approaching got closer and closer to the gang. Then finally, as the anticipation started to build, did it dissipate when Izuku rounded the corner dragging something heavy. Nobody moved as Izuku dragged this thing, and when he was close enough he turned it around and pushed it in front of Muffin. Chicken legs. He breathed heavily as he put a paw on the massive package of chicken drumsticks. 14 in total. They're not cooked, so the bones are safe to eat for everyone. Izuku then shook his fur as if to shake off a bad feeling. To steal from the humans, Muffin whispered. This is fresh too from the store. Izuku nodded and Muffin's eyes widened a bit. We've eaten from trash cans, but this is not bad. Muffin smiled a little, and then she turned and opened the package. The other cats descended upon the food, each taking one leg for themselves and walking off to enjoy their food in peace. Izuku watched as they all got comfortable and ate. He was suddenly nudged. There's not enough for you. I can share, Annalie said, and Izuku looked at her. There's no need. None of that, Muffin told Izuku. I can see perhaps you have a lot more potential than I was willing to give you credit for. Go ahead and eat. I can see you'll be a good addition to our little gang. She then tapped her tail against his shoulder. I expect good things from you, Izuku. Izuku purred as he watched Muffin go, and Italy nudged him again. Good job. I knew you'd be a good addition. It's nice to have you back again, Italy said, and it made Izuku nod. Yeah, I think this is the place for me. The days blurred, and Izuku has to say this was pretty nice. The cat gang, despite their wariness of him, welcomed him once Muffin gave him a space in their gang. Muffin kept her distance but was always watching, always making sure everyone's needs were met. It was Muffin that would send out cats to hunt to get food, and on occasion she would go and get food. There were some cats that were like Italy, wounded but able to help. Each one had the same story. Muffin helped them. Muffin was the one who saved them. There was still this air about her that felt just too familiar to Izuku. Like he knew her from somewhere, and it wasn't until days later, maybe even a week later, did it finally hit him. He was sitting next to Italy, and Italy was grooming him, laping her tongue up and down his neck, and it was like something awakened in him. An early memory. A memory of being next to a bigger cat that would groom him. The memory of fighting for space by trying to push another cat away. Izuku's heart dropped when it hit him. Muffin was his sister, and he was sure she knew this. Izuku didn't know how to approach Muffin. In fact, ever since realizing that they were siblings, he took some pains in avoiding the female. I have siblings and I don't know how to feel about it. Izuku just really assumed he spawned in, but no, his memories were there and they couldn't be wrong. He remembers Muffin and his mother. Kinda. His mother Narinko was still a blur. He doesn't remember if he had any other siblings from the same litter as him either. Izuku looked into his reflection in a murky puddle on a sidewalk. He guessed he and Muffin looked alike, but he didn't see it. Maybe because he was green. Maybe I'm wrong. he hummed before sitting down and putting his tail across his paws. Maybe I'm just thinking she's my sister, he mused as he then made himself into a loaf on the sidewalk. Maybe it's just loneliness. I do miss Itoshi ... and the others. I wonder how Deku has been holding up. If he even misses me now. I wonder if Itoshi even misses me or if ... he's glad I'm gone. He won't have to worry about Nai's finding his location through me anymore. Izuku gave a soft sniffle as he tried to hold his tears back. God, how long has he been gone? A week, 2 maybe. Hard to say when you're a cat. Hey, Itachi approached Izuku and sat down. Muffin assigned us both hunting duty. I should warn you since I'm missing an ear and an eye. I'm not the best at hunting mice or rats anymore. That's fine. Izuku stood and gave his body a good and hard shake as he pushed his thoughts to the side. I'm not in the mood for rats or mice, he decided suddenly. Usually, he wouldn't turn up an opportunity, but honestly, Izuku was just in a mood. A mood he couldn't describe a mood for. Havoc. He wanted to cause some havoc. He was a cat, was he not? Cats are known for causing havoc, and that's just what he was going to do. You know what, Itachi? I think we deserve something nice. Something from the humans. More of those bird legs, she asked almost excitedly. Nah, the store is catching on to me again. Can't frequent there too often unless I want to get reacquainted with Mr. Broom real fast. I got a better idea. Follow me. Better than the birds? She inquired while trotting with Izuku. Much better, he promised her. You see, Itachi, Japan is full of convenient things for the taking, and I'm honestly ashamed that I didn't think about this before. Okay. What is it? They turned down the sidewalk. Izuku smiled when he saw a row of vending machines lined up neatly against a wall. Vending machines. What? Itachi inquired, and Izuku knew he was looking like the cat that caught the canary. Itachi, in those machines there is a bunch of food. Food that we can get to, Itachi. It's all right there for the taking. Giddiness ran through Izuku's veins at the mere thought of this. But a thought hit him as he looked at Itachi. We may not be able to get much with just the two of us, he murmured. Not only that, but some vending machines are locked until paid for to deter thieves. Itachi just looked confused, and Izuku really couldn't blame her too much. Izuku waited for traffic. Itachi almost didn't, and he put a paw out to stop her from walking out into the road. Once cleared, he walked and she followed. The place was occupied but not too busy. Perfect for Izuku to scope the place out and look around to see which vending machine shall be their victim. But see, Itachi just followed behind and watched. There are 4 vending machines in total. 1 snack machine that sold sandwiches and even some American snacks, 1 hot food machine, and a drink machine. The drink machine is out, Izuku decided on the spot as he looked at the other machines. Izuku trotted to the first one and looked inside of it. He wanted to see the mechanisms and what kind of machine it was. It was a traditional machine with spirals that would move and knock the snack of choice down. He put his paw on the hatch and it swung open with ease. The only issue I have with this is that not everyone can eat this stuff. The sandwiches may be fine, but some of these other snacks are ... not the best for cats. He could only muse before backing off. So ... that left one. The one with the hot food, and Izuku was in luck as it wasn't a ramen machine. No, this one sold takoyaki, chicken, and a load of other foods waiting to be heated and served. Izuku walked up to the hatch and saw that it was a door. All he had to do was swing the door open with his paw, and he gave the inside a quick glance around, but he couldn't see much. Izuku, Itachi sounded cautious. There are humans around here, and I'm not so sure about whatever you're planning. I don't want to go back. Izuku, she told him, and he looked at her. Her one ear was down and she was starting to bristle nervously. Izuku backed away from the machine and he felt angry. Not at Itachi, never at Itachi, at her treatment, at her mauled state. Itachi, what if I told you that if we do this then we'll be getting back at the humans? He told her softly, and that got her attention. We can get back at them. Yes. Like this. Izuku then popped into the vending machine. But she stopped and watched him. What are you doing? She poked her head into the machine and watched as Izuku started to climb up a little higher. Just gotta scope out what they got. Izuku had to awkwardly climb past the resting cradle that would bring the food to the microwave, and he would eventually find a spot where he could see everything in the center of the machine. The inside was fully stocked with containers of food. The food was stacked neatly in little rows, and from what he could see and figure out, that the person would put the money in and choose a food. The cradle would move up and the food would be pushed on the cradle and moved to the microwave to be heated and then dispensed back into the cradle and delivered to the hatch. Pretty simple. Izuku jumped back down and faced Itachi. How do we get back at them with this? He repeated her question and she nodded. It's simple, we're taking what's theirs, Izuku told her as he stepped out of the vending machine. But we need more help than just the two of us, Izuku mumbled as he started to pace around. I wonder if we can get Ash or Speckle to help us. Itachi tilted her head. I feel like this is something we need to talk to Muffin about. Muffin. Izuku looked down at his paws. Yeah, I guess we could do that. Izuku mused, but he didn't like the idea of having to talk to her, but he knew that this would be the steal of a lifetime for them if done right. Izuku and Itachi would make their retreat back to the gang. Ash was the one keeping watch. Ash was a dusty gray tabby with yellow eyes. The Tom's ears went back when the two came back with nothing to show for it. Muffin isn't going to be happy. Ash warned them and Izuku just gave the Tom a look. We're not done, we just need to talk to her, Izuku explained to Ash as he slipped into the entrance. Speckle gave them a look as they passed. Don't say it, Izuku said as he walked past her. It made her huff a little laugh. Still, he had to approach Muffin, who seemed to be waiting for them. Nothing, I'm surprised, she mused as Izuku and Itachi approached her. Not nothing. Izuku swallowed hard as he looked from Muffin quickly and then looked back at her. Moss has an idea to get back at the humans, Itachi said almost excitedly. But he needs help. Oh, Muffin asked, and if she had an eyebrow she'd be raising it. I'm listening. So, Izuku explained what he wanted to do with the vending machines and why it would be best if they had help. We'd probably need the whole gang and it'd be best if we did it at night with less people around, but it can be done, I believe. Muffin tilted her head from side to side as she mused on his request. My question is, why do you want to do this? You've shown that you're competent enough to hunt for all of us, but suddenly you want to do something rather daring and get us caught. I just think it's our turn. Why should we hide in fear when they have so much food for the taking? Muffin looked at him, her eyes and face remaining emotionless as she did this. Then she relented. All right, then. I'm listening. What's your plan? Hitoshi's back was itching. It was itching. Nothing he did relieved the itch. For the first couple of days the itch was subtle, but now days later it was going to irritating levels of itching. It didn't help that school was back in session now, and now he just had to sit there with an itchy back as they studied and learned. What doubly sucked was the fact that everyone was training on their ultimate moves, on their quirks, and there's Itoshi and Gyro just sparring with one another during each session. It stung, but Itoshi was still glad that his friends were able to expand on their quirks in such a way. It's just a shame he's not able to do so. He paused. He called during his and Gyro's sparring. Gyro had him in her arms and was prepared to throw him to the ground. Okay, the moment she let go he flew to the nearest wall and started to rub his back up and down on it to try and relieve the itch. You good? She inquired while he wriggled violently against the wall. I just have an itch, he told her while wincing as the itch wasn't relieved. I noticed. It seems you've had an itch for the last couple of days. Gyro approached him and then tapped his shoulder. Turn, I'll help you. He was thankful as he turned his back to her and she ran her nails up and down his back. I can't figure out how it happened, he whispered. It just flared up. Do you have any symptoms? He asked her, hoping maybe it was just a thing from losing his quirk somehow. Gyro shook her head. No, I've been fine, she told him and pulled away from him after a few seconds. Better? Not really, but thanks regardless. The itch was still persisting, and the thing is, it's not from just one part of his back. It was like his whole back was itching like crazy. What's going on? Toshinori approached the both of them. The man was bandaged with his arm in a sling and a wrap around his head. He looked so normal it was strange. He looked happy. Shouldn't he be upset? He was retiring and it was Hitoshi's fault. Sorry, Hitoshi's back was itching, Gyro explained while she ran her fingers through her purple locks. Hitoshi felt his face heat up a little. I can see that, Toshinori mumbled, and at first Hitoshi didn't understand, until he realized he was against the wall again and wiggling violently like a bear. Do you need to see recovery, girl? Perhaps you're having an allergic reaction to something. Unless I laid in a bed of shrimp last night, which I didn't, I can't see that happening, Hitoshi told All Might, but still he was rubbing his back against the wall. Still, you should probably go and see her to make sure everything is all right, Toshinori urged, and Hitoshi rolled his eyes before he pulled himself off of the wall. Why don't you go with him, young Jiru? Jiru shrugged, clearly not having anything better to do. Fine, he huffed in mild irritation. He was already behind his class and he didn't want to be even more behind because his back was itching. Still, something was wrong, it had to be, right? Or was he just being ... Was he faking? Was he fine but he was faking? No, he didn't think he was faking. Hitoshi missed Izuku. Izuku would be able to help him, maybe. Or at least talk some sense into him. Well, meow some sense into him as the connection was cut. I hope you're okay, he whispered to himself while leaving the training gym with Jiru. There was some silence between Jiru and Hitoshi. Hitoshi was trying to scratch at his back, but no matter what he did, it didn't help. He could feel Jiru's eyes on him, the girl watching him closely but unsure of how to speak. Hitoshi grunted and before groaning in frustration when the itch just wouldn't stop. Still, he just couldn't take the silence. How are you holding up without your quirk? Better than me, he asked. Jiru gave him a tiny smile before looking away from him. You can say that ... It hasn't been easy, I'll say that much. She then scratched at her cheek. I miss my ears. Miss jabbing Kaminari whenever he gets too close. I miss it a lot in all actuality. I feel weak. I know what you mean, Hitoshi agreed with her. I never felt weaker than now. A stray piece of hair fell into his face and he paused his back scratching to redo his hair. He took it out of its ponytail and quickly put it back up. What's up with your hair, man? I miss your troll doll style of hair. I dunno, Itoshi admitted. It won't go back up. It just stays down now. He rubbed at his tired eyes and then immediately went back to trying to scratch his back. Boo! Toga popped out of the bushes suddenly and immediately both Hitoshi and Jiru jumped in alarm with cries of alarm. Toga let out joyful laughs before she started to walk with them. Where are we going? She inquired once both Hitoshi and Jiru calmed down from their initial shock. Recovery girl, Itoshi explained as he stopped by a tree and started to scratch his back on it. My back is itching like crazy and I can't stop it, he told her with a wince. Oh, that sucks, Toga told him. Let me help you so we can get there faster. Don't you have class? Jiru inquired. Itoshi peeled himself off of the tree and while they walked Toga helped rake her nails up and down his back. Study hall. So I was just wandering around, she told them both joyfully. How have you two been anyways? Itchy, Itoshi whined, making Toga giggle. I can see that. Don't worry, I'm sure Recovery Girl can help you. I hope. And you, Jiru? Toga asked while looking at the other girl. As mentioned, I've been fine, just feeling weak. Yeah, I felt that way too. Angry mostly, but I mostly feel naked without my quirk. Yeah, both Hitoshi and Jiru agreed. The rest of the walk was filled with mindless chatter as Toga helped scratch Hitoshi's back. They were almost to Recovery Girl's office when they stopped suddenly. Itoshi, just the person I wanted to see, came Nedzu's voice, making everyone turn towards his direction. And with young Gyro and Toga as well. The principal approached them all. Nedzu's eyes locked onto Toga's hands that were still scratching at Hitoshi's back. Is everything alright? My back has been itching like crazy these last few days, Itoshi explained. I must ask, is it so bad that you can't see me in my office for a few moments? You're not in trouble. This is actually about Moss. I'll live. Itoshi pulled himself away from Toga. Lead the way, he said, and it made Nedzu smile. Wonderful. Young Toga, young Jiru, please don't wait up as this may take a while. Nedzu told the two and started to lead Hitoshi away. Hitoshi tried to keep his itching at bay while walking with the principal. You'll be pleased to know that some insight has been discovered on where Moss might be and more importantly why he left. He left. He wasn't catnapped. He was not catnapped, Nedzu reassured Hitoshi, and that did make Hitoshi feel a little better. Knowing that Moss wasn't kidnapped was a weight off of Hitoshi's shoulders. That being said, well, I should let you see for yourself, Nedzu said softly right as they got to the door. Upon entering, Hitoshi was surprised to see his three dads all sitting there. When he entered, they looked at him, but he noticed fairly quickly how Oboro was quick to look away. Well, that explains why Toshinori was in charge of the class today. Hitoshi noticed Shouto was in here as well. Each father looked rather upset in their own ways. Still, Hitoshi sat in the empty seat and subtly scratched at his back with the back of the chair. Alright, so, let me get you up to speed, young Hitoshi. You see, the GoPro that was attached to Moss was taken out of our custody and given to the HPSC for evaluation. Once they were finished, they handed it back over to me. This does mean that Moss is back on their radar, but we'll deal with that in due time. Once it was given back to us, rightfully, I looked through its contents and, well, let me just show you. Oboro put his hands over his eyes and turned towards the ground, and this didn't go unnoticed by Hitoshi. Nedzu went to his computer and started to type away. He then turned the monitor so Hitoshi could see. To say Hitoshi was shocked, upset, angry, and even betrayed at the conversation he was hearing. Then it happened. Maybe we should consider getting rid of Moss. Hitoshi's itching subsided for the moment as he slowly turned to Oboro. For a moment he thought about biting his tongue. No, he gave in to his anger. Are you kidding me? He whispered. I was thinking of your safety, Oboro said softly, but Hitoshi cut him off. I understand that. But did you forget that Moss is Izuku Midoriya, the real one? The boy that committed suicide when he figured he was never going to be good enough. Yes, Izuku and Nai's have a connection, but damn it. There's no way that Nai's found out about the campsite through Moss. No way. Hitoshi stood up. Moss Izuku, he's been putting countermeasures in place and he knows not to say too much in the mind link. He's been doing everything right to protect me, and tears sprung into Hitoshi's eyes and he gave his head a shake. It wasn't because of Moss. If Nai's would have made a breakthrough, Moss would have known. Hitoshi, I understand you're upset, Oboro tried to say, but Hitoshi cut him off. It may not be the first time he spoke back to an adult, or even the first time he was angry at one, but it was the first time he expressed his anger towards one of the Fosters. Upset? I'd be upset if it was just you being worried, but to even suggest getting rid of Moss. He's human, in mind and spirit, remember, and if it wasn't for him I would have died. My uncle, he was on the path of killing me 2 years ago. I am not joking when I say the night Moss saved me I was sure I was going to die by my uncle's hands, if not that night then very soon, mostly like from starvation or dehydration, take you pick. God. Hitoshi, again, I understand you and your ire right now, but are you okay? Aburo asked as Shouta and Hisashi were just watching him like he's gone crazy. No, I'm not okay, he yelled. Moss is gone because he feels God. Like he's no longer good enough for us. And it was then did it finally hit him what he was doing. Itoshi had his back slammed against the wall trying to relieve the itch that's been bugging him for the last 2 days. Even as he was rubbing his back against the wall like a bear does against a tree, he was still trying to aggressively reach his hands every which way he could. Do you want recovery, girl? Aburo asked, and Hitoshi couldn't help himself as the outburst just happened. No, I want my cat, my best friend, and he's gone, and I don't know where he is. Hitoshi lowered his head, but he could still feel his back wriggle against the wall as the itch still persisted. Yes, Nedzu said. Well, there is some good news, but I do insist that maybe your back should be looked at if the itching is that bad. Let me call recovery girl up here. Nedzu grabbed the phone to dial recovery girl. Let me see your back. As much as Hitoshi wanted to be a bit defiant and not let Aburo near him, he knew the man was clearly upset about the whole situation, and so Hitoshi turned his back towards his foster dad. Fine, but I'm still mad at you. Of course, dear. You say it's been itching for days. Aburo grabbed the hem of Hitoshi's shirt and started to lift it up. At least 2. It was fine at first, but it just kept. It keeps itching and nothing I do can relieve it. Jesus, Aburo whispered. Hitoshi became a spectacle as Aizawa and Hisashi came to see his back as well. Yeah, you've scratched the hell out of your back. You got welts and scratch marks. Aburo's hand was cold as he touched a sensitive spot. No doubt a spot where Hitoshi must have been scratching himself bloody because it felt like a scab. Hitoshi's back arched a little at Aburo's cold touch. It itches. An itch you can't relieve, Shouta whispered, and it sounded like he was musing on something before he turned to look at Nedzu. Hitoshi watched as something passed between Shouta and Nedzu as the rodent nodded. Yes, but before we change the subject back to me, Principal Nedzu, you said you might have found something on Moss. Itoshi inquired, and Nedzu straightened up a little. I do believe I have some information on where he might be. However, the evidence isn't concrete, so we're going to wait just to make sure. For now, we should focus on your sudden itchiness. Itoshi was afraid of that, but unfortunately there was nothing he could do. However, a small part of him was relieved in a way. Relieved to know that Izuku was still in Musutafu, hopefully, and didn't board a ship to get as far away as possible. I'm going to bring you home, Izuku. I promise. To say the gang was well fed was an understatement. They borderline gorged themselves on the food they managed to nab from the vending machines, and they got a lot. They all worked together, with Izuku climbing inside the machine. 2. Ash and Speckle kept watch for any humans, while the rest of them worked as a conveyor of sorts. Izuku would bring a box down and hand it to the next cat, and the next cat would hand it off to the next cat, and so on and so forth. Izuku showed them how to open the plastic to get to the food once they were safe with their prizes. There was only one hiccup. A couple of humans had walked by and one recorded the incident, but nothing should come of that. It was a heist and it paid off. Izuku's belly was round as he ate a good amount of takoyaki. Granted, it was cold, but that was fine. Nobody else was complaining. In fact, everyone was rather happy as they all lazed around to digest their food. Not bad, housebit. Not bad at all. Muffin purred as she groomed herself. I never would have thought of taking from those machines. Izuku looked at her before he just laid on his side, and he looked up at the starry sky above. Yeah, well, I guess I know a thing or two from being a housebit, as you like to put it. Muffin laid next to him, and for a moment the two of them sat in a comfortable silence. Izuku looked at Muffin and then down at his paws. Muffin ... This has been bugging me. Are you my sister? Muffin looked at him. Her mint green eyes gave nothing away, and Izuku realized he may have used the wrong word, so he tried again. My litter mate. Are you ... Were we born to the same mother? Muffin gave him a little smile before turning away. I was wondering if you remembered me, she admitted. Yes, I remember you vividly. I won't lie, I figured you'd be dead by now with that coat of yours. You stand out. Trust me, I should be dead 10 times over, Izuku told her honestly. Muffin sighed as she looked up at the stars with him. I'm glad to see you again, I won't lie. I think you're just what we need for the gang. Can you tell me about our mother, or even what I was like as a kitten? Muffin looked at him. Well, I can't really say much. You were born normal. You were white, pure white, then one day you just turned this putrid green color. Our mother bathed and bathed you, but nothing she did worked. But I see you still have some white, she mused as she noticed his necklace. Then once you were old enough to eat solids, you were left alone. Left alone? You were a threat with your coat. Muffin shrugged. You just walked off and mother didn't stop you. None of us did. You also didn't speak much. I won't lie, we figured you were disabled in one way or another. Just the runt. Like I said, we didn't think you'd last out there, as cruel as it sounds. The life of a cat, Izuku whispered. Disowned by the humans for being quirkless and disowned by the cats for being green. How pleasant. He spat. Next life I'm going to be a bird, I swear. Muffin gave a purring laugh. Next life. Long story, Izuku said with a headshake. You're rather intelligent, Muffin. You understand things most cats don't. Muffin shrugged and laid back down. I guess it runs in the family. She tucked her legs under her. Yeah, I guess it does. Enough chat. Rest. We got much to do tomorrow. Do we? Muffin nodded. Yeah, we do, and I'm going to need your help, housecat. Izuku snorted and then laid his head down. I wouldn't have it any other way. Izuku felt like he got somewhere and nowhere with that conversation. He didn't talk much as a kitten, and he was born with a white coat that turned green later on. Then he was casted out. If only Itoshi were here to hear all of this. I hope you're okay, he thought while glancing at the stars one last time before finally slipping into sleep. If Izuku were in the dorms, he would see that Itoshi wasn't doing that good. Not just with his itching back, but as the night fell, Itoshi just couldn't sleep alone, which usually he would have Moss there to comfort him. For tonight, as Itoshi had to have a safety precaution in place. A safety precaution that Tenko had to come in and explain why it was important to do. While Hitoshi's back was healed from his fervent scratching the adults had in force, and not 5. He protested as he held up his hands that were encased in oven mitts and duct taped, both hands, so there was no escaping this. I know, but this is just so you don't scratch yourself in your sleep. You've already broken your skin after being healed, Shouta explained as he put the duct tape in his pocket. It's just until we figure out what's wrong with you. That pill you gave me didn't help either, Itoshi mumbled as he shook his hands to try and dislodge the oven mitts. I know, and that's why we're worried. Can't you explain what's going on? Itoshi asked as he started to try and bite at the oven mitts to get them off. When you stop acting feral, Itoshi growled, his teeth still around the end of the oven mitt. Finally, he let go of the oven mitt. Shouta sighed once Itoshi calmed down. Your body is reacting negatively to something. We thought that something was quirk. That pill we had you take was a quirk suppressant, but the effects didn't go away, so now we're not sure what is causing this. So, for now, until this itching ceases at night, you have to have oven mitts taped to your hands so you're not scratching yourself raw. A quirk. Nyes did mention something about wanting to give me a quirk, but ... it can't be that, can it? We don't know. For now, try and rest if you can. I can try. Shouta started to walk towards Hitoshi's door, but Hitoshi stopped him. Dad. Yes? Shouta stopped and turned to look at Hitoshi. If it's not too much, can Eri sleep in my room tonight? If she wants to, that is. I just don't want to be alone tonight. Shouta's eyes softened. I'll see if she wants to. And he left. Well, it turns out Eri was thrilled. Slumber party, she announced as she hit Hitoshi with her pillow the moment she saw him. Hitoshi could only take the pillow thrashing as he had oven mitts taped to his hand. Still, he wouldn't be alone tonight, and that's all that mattered. When Eri was snuggled up close to him, Hitoshi would look out his balcony and sigh at the starry sky. I hope you're okay, was the last thought he had before he fell into a fitful and itchy sleep. The early morning sun shone brightly over the alleyway, casting its rays on the remnants of morning dew and the lingering humidity that made Izuku sweat slightly under his fur. Letting out a big yawn, Izuku extended his hind legs after scratching the concrete beneath his paws. Morning, Izuku. Annalie greeted him, her voice still heavy with sleep. Mornin', Izuku grunted, turning to lick and gnaw at the base of his tail. His once clean fur was now marred with a dirty grayish-green hue, and knots were beginning to form. How long had he been away? It was hard to say. The days had blurred together. At this point, Izuku knew every cat in the gang. There were, of course, Annalie and Muffin, but there were also Ash, Speckle, Cola, Olive, Root and Rose, Nori, Cactus, Stripe, Tora, Sora, and Savage. Root and Rose were like Muffin and Izuku in that they were litter mates, identical in appearance. Both were brown tabbies with black stripes and white chests. They flanked Izuku, rubbing against him. Rose nestled under his chin, while Root brushed against his face. Their purring prompted Izuku to purr in response. We're on hunting duty, Rose began, and Root finished her sentence, as usual. And we wanted to know if you would like to join us. Sorry, guys, but I'm actually going on a scouting mission today, Izuku replied. There's another cat prowling around, and Muffin wants to ensure they won't be a problem, Izuku explained, and Root flicked his tail under Izuku's chin. Suit yourself, Root said before departing with his sister to hunt. Izuku watched them go, gave himself one last stretch, and headed towards the entrance. He bid farewell to Cola and Cactus, who were on guard duty. Good luck, Cola said. His brown fur shimmered in the morning sun. And Izuku noticed his right hind leg was missing, a consequence of being used by humans to test their quirks. Same to you, Izuku responded without looking back. And then he set off on his scouting mission. After weeks of living with the other cats, he had grown accustomed to their scents and learned to distinguish them from unfamiliar felines. Trotting along the sidewalk, he remained vigilant, scanning the surroundings for the stray cat. Izuku patted around, deliberately rubbing himself against the wall to mark his scent without spraying. He moved on to the next spot, raising his nose to the air and flicking his ears, alert to any unfamiliar presence. An intruding cat had entered the area, and Izuku was determined to investigate. He turned the nearest corner, narrowing his eyes as he sensed the cat's proximity. Flicking his ear, he crouched low to the ground, keeping his ears perked for any approaching feline. Izuku let out a gasp when he was suddenly tackled, his assailant silently pouncing on him. Both cats crashed to the ground, exchanging loud yowls and slashing at each other. Izuku instinctively bit into the cat's scruff, paying little attention to its fur color or build. "Mother," Izuku gasped, and in a reflexive action, he kicked the large orange cat off him. Pumpkin hit the ground but quickly regained his footing. The orange cat panted heavily and shook himself, droplets of blood flinging off his body from the scratches Izuku inflicted. Though the wounds weren't deep, Izuku felt a pang of guilt until he noticed the GoPro. "Medzo sent you, didn't he?" Izuku asked. "If you're talking about the giant rat that I wasn't allowed to try and eat, yes. He instructed me to find you, and I did. Now, let's go home," Pumpkin began. "I'm not going," Izuku interrupted matter-of-factly, sitting down. Pumpkin, who had turned away for a moment, stopped and turned back to face Izuku. "I don't recall asking for your opinion." "You're coming home," Pumpkin replied matter-of-factly. Izuku shook his head. "No," he reiterated. "It's best if I stay away from everyone." "Oh, that's what you believe." Pumpkin seemed to understand as he nodded, eliciting a sigh of relief from Izuku. Foolishly, Izuku believed the matter was settled and turned away from Pumpkin. "Anyway, you should leave, hey," Izuku exclaimed as Pumpkin grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, causing him to go limp. Pumpkin struggled but managed to awkwardly walk, Izuku dangling from his mouth. "I'm not a kid. Put me down." Despite his protests, Izuku couldn't struggle because Pumpkin had him securely. "You're coming home, even if I have to do this all day," Pumpkin growled, waddling through the alleyway with Izuku in tow. "Let go of me." "No, don't force my hand, Pumpkin. Do what you must. But regardless, you're coming home," Pumpkin declared firmly. Pumpkin, fine." Izuku could only open his mouth, take a deep breath, and let out a wail that resonated through the alleyway and beyond. "That's how you plan on stopping me? By crying?" Pumpkin retorted, sounding irritated as he continued to waddle with Izuku in his mouth. Izuku kept screaming, and his persistent cries soon paid off. Before Pumpkin could reach the other end of the alleyway, Adelie appeared, her shoulders hunched and fur bristling as she stood on her toes. "Release him," she demanded, her fur rising to make herself appear bigger. Her good eye narrowed, and her good ear went back. Pumpkin took a step back, narrowing his own eye. "Get out of my way," Pumpkin hissed, his mouth still clutching Izuku's scruff. Then, the others arrived. "Release him. We won't ask again." Muffin's voice came from behind, causing Pumpkin to turn. The rest cautiously approached but refrained from attacking, awaiting Muffin's command. The only two missing were Root and Rose, who were still out hunting. Pumpkin gently set Izuku down. Izuku shook himself off and stayed low to the ground, his ears back and tail lashing as he glared at Pumpkin. Pumpkin looked back at him, and they locked eyes. "The others miss you. Brian won't eat, and Brad is constantly waiting for your return. Jelly and Tiny Tim don't understand that you're missing. Moreover, something is wrong with Itoshi, and it's troubling the adults," Pumpkin explained. "Your human is worried about you and wants nothing more than for you to come back. You're needed at home." Izuku's tail lashed. "I can't go back. I'm doing this for Hitoshi." Pumpkin raised his nose in a snarl. "Your human is sad and hurting, and you aren't there to make him feel better." Pumpkin's roar reminded Izuku of Bakugo, causing his ears to flatten, and he winced. He made his choice, Muffin interjected, placing herself between Izuku and Pumpkin. "And you better leave, housecat," Muffin hissed, getting in Pumpkin's face. "Housecat? Who are you calling a housecat?" Both Pumpkin and Muffin raised onto their toes, slamming their heads together, growls escaping their mouths as tensions rose. "Watch who you're talking to," Pumpkin snarled. "Get out of our territory." "You aren't welcome," Muffin shot back. Pumpkin glanced at Muffin and then at Izuku. "You're making a mistake," he warned Izuku before backing away from Muffin. "Don't think this is the last you've seen of me." With that, he turned and departed, brushing past Muffin as he left. Muffin and the others watched Pumpkin go. "Cactus, Ash, make sure he leaves the territory. If he tries to cross again, don't hesitate," Muffin commanded. And both Cactus and Ash began following Pumpkin. Muffin looked at Izuku. "Are you okay?" she asked, helping him to his feet. "Yeah, he didn't hurt me," Izuku replied, giving himself a good shake. Muffin narrowed her eyes, then looked in the direction Pumpkin had gone. "Good. But, despite that, you weren't abandoned like you claimed. I just never corrected you guys. I left on my own accord to protect my human," Izuku explained to Muffin. "I was a hazard to him and the others. I did it for his safety. I apologize for the indiscretion." Izuku noticed Muffin lashing her tail slightly in response. "Well, we should head back. Let's go," Muffin ordered, her face once again revealing nothing as she stalked away. Everyone else followed suit, including Izuku. However, he couldn't help but glance over his shoulder. He knew Pumpkin was right, and he would eventually return, but that would be for another time. Another time. "Your human is hurting." Pumpkin's voice echoed in Izuku's ears and rattled in his mind. What did he mean by that? Is Itoshi physically hurting, or does he just miss me? Does he even miss me? Izuku pondered silently. Izuku, Muffin called, and Izuku turned back to look at her before nodding. Just thinking. I'm right behind you, Muffin. Izuku now had the gang by his side, and Nice, at least for the moment, had backed off, albeit temporarily. Itoshi wasn't in immediate danger as long as Izuku was away. Hey, Muffin, Izuku changed the subject as he approached her. I was thinking, seeing how the vending machine heist worked out so well, do you want to try another one? I'm listening, Muffin replied, intrigued by Izuku's suggestion. Itoshi woke up with a sharp gasp, almost springing out of his bed. Eri, who had spent the night with him again, also gasped, startled by his sudden awakening. It had been about a week since Hitoshi's back started flaring up. It was Friday now, and still nothing could be done, and it was driving him and his fosters crazy. What initially began as an itch had now turned into a constant source of irritation and agony. Unable to bear the pain, he could hardly get out of bed in the morning, staying put except for essential trips to the bathroom, as sweat formed on his brow and trickled down his body. Hitoshi's backache intensified, preventing him from even scratching it due to the oven mitts he had taped around his hands. Glancing at the clock, he noticed it was just shy of 3 in the morning. He whimpered, taking in deep breaths while clenching his teeth together. Eri, concerned, bent down to be at eye level with him. Are you okay? She asked, careful not to touch his back. Hitoshi inhaled and exhaled sharply before gritting his teeth. I don't know, he admitted, leaning so far forward that his forehead pressed against the bed. Eri whimpered and hugged him, avoiding any contact with his back, her expression filled with confusion and fear. Suddenly, a jolt of pain shot down Hitoshi's back, causing him to gasp in agony. That was what had awakened him. It felt as if something were moving beneath his skin. Tears welled up in the corners of his eyes as he desperately clutched his shoulders. His mind raced with a mix of confusion and fear, trying to comprehend what was happening, while Eri watched him with a blend of concern and alarm. Struggling to sit up, Hitoshi hissed in pain and nearly gagged. He found the best position to sit in was with his head to his covers and his back arched outwards. His breathing became ragged as tears collected into the corners of his eyes. Hitoshi swallowed hard and licked his drying lips. He let out several deep and uneven breaths. Hitoshi let out another whimper as he felt something move under his skin yet again. Eri ... Go get someone, anyone, I don't care who. Hitoshi demanded. Something, I just need help. He told her and she nodded in understanding. I'll go and get Mr. Dad, she said while stepping down from his bed. He should be sleeping in the dorms tonight, right? Hitoshi didn't know. Sometimes Aizawa liked to sleep in the dorms to make sure everyone was doing okay, but most of the time he stayed in the apartment with the other fosters. Go and see, please, he asked her, and Eri nodded before leaving. This left Hitoshi alone and in pain. The pain grew as the seconds ticked by. Hitoshi let out several loud breaths as he felt like his back was on fire. Every nerve ending felt like it was set ablaze as he felt the movement again under his skin. As something wriggled begging to be freed, Hitoshi let out a groan and blindly reached behind him for his pillow. He found it after a few attempts and smacks. Hitoshi grabbed his pillow and bit down on it to both muffle his screams and to stop himself from cracking his teeth. Hitoshi. Takoyami poked his head into Hitoshi's door, and Hitoshi realized that Eri had left his door open on her way to find their dad. Takoyami was dressed down in a black tank top and in black sweatpants. Takoyami put his hand on the doorframe as he looked concerned, and dark shadow was poking out of his shoulder to see what was going on. I would ask if everything is all right, but I don't think I need to. Takoyami walked into Hitoshi's room. Is it your back? He asked while looking at Hitoshi's back. Hitoshi only silently nodded and pressed his face against his pillow. I swear I feel something move. Hitoshi's breath was sharp as he started to shake a little. I see it. Takoyami's voice was worried. There's something under your skin. I don't know what it is, but there is something there. Takoyami's fingers grazed against a part of Hitoshi's back, and Hitoshi let out a soft cry and visibly flinched at Takoyami's light touch. Hitoshi let out several pants and shoved his face into the pillow. Oi, what's going on? Unicorn just ran out of the dorms. Bakugo came into the room next, and it took all Hitoshi had not to tell them both to just leave him be, but it was too late and Bakugo entered. Hitoshi could hear him stepping forward. Dad must not. Hitoshi's voice was cut off when he felt something shift under his skin again, making him groan in pain as he pressed his face to his pillow. Bakugo made his own noise of discomfort. You saw that right, bird? So, Hitoshi wasn't imagining things. It seemed that it was clear that Bakugo and Takoyami saw it shift and move. There's something under his skin, Takoyami confirmed. That wasn't comforting to hear. If anything, it was horrifying, and it made Hitoshi's heart race wildly. What's happening to me? He wildly thought, and there it was again, another painful jab against his back. Hitoshi then realized that whatever he was feeling wasn't shifting, but rather was rubbing against skin, trying to escape from their confines. Hitoshi panted heavily and just wished for the pain to stop. Bakugo stepped up with Takoyami and stared at Hitoshi back, and it made him feel like a spectacle. I wonder if we should cut. No, Itoshi yelled that bordered on a shriek. You are not cutting into me. Okay, Bakugo said in a surprisingly calm voice. But there is absolutely something under your skin. It's probably why you've been scratching at yourself so viciously. I agree, Takoyami said. It seems like it's trying to get out. He whispered softly before his fingers gently touched Hitoshi's back and it made Hitoshi flinch. There was another movement under his skin and Hitoshi gritted his teeth while breathing in and out heavily through his nose. His breathing picked up into a rapid pant as he realized that whatever was happening now. What shouted nearly overshot Hitoshi's room and slid quickly to correct himself. What's going on? He asked breathlessly. He looked nervous, as he should be. He came running into the apartment. He stopped and his eyes went wide. What the fuck? That's not a good sign. Itoshi realized rather hopelessly. Well, Shouta quickly regained himself and gave his head a firm shake. Both of you, out, he ordered as he pushed both Bakugo and Takoyami towards the door. Wait, Itoshi gasped. Takoyami can stay if he wants, Hitoshi whispered, and Shouta looked at Takoyami and nodded and stayed behind as Hitoshi requested. Bakugo did leave, but even though the door shut, Hitoshi was sure Bakugo was still in the hallway. Okay, Shouta walked over to Hitoshi but looked confused as he looked at Hitoshi's back, unsure of how to proceed. Hitoshi let out a gasp as he winced when he felt whatever was in his back move again. Please make it stop, he cried into his pillow. Hitoshi wished for Moss at that moment. Moss may not be able to make the pain stop, but he would be great at comforting Hitoshi. Still, Takoyami put his hand on Hitoshi's while Dark Shadow stretched out to touch Hitoshi's other hand. Takoyami ran his thumb over Hitoshi's knuckles. Hitoshi moved his hand so he and Takoyami were now holding hands. Hitoshi let out another yelp as there was that movement again. Then he let out a cry when Shouta just lightly touched his back. This is bulging out of your back, Shouta explained in a soft voice. It's like it's trying to escape. Shouta then gasped as if something struck him. Holy shit, I think I know what's happening. I need a knife. No, Hitoshi shrieked yet again. What was with people and cutting into him? Hitoshi, I'm going to word this as delicately as possible. I think the quirk transfer was successful. And if this is what I think it is, I need to either cut into your back or it's going to burst from your back. I wish we had another way, but I'm afraid we don't, Shouta explained, and Hitoshi knew he must have looked afraid. We got Recovery Girl on the way, and I'm going to try and make this as painless as possible, I promise. What's happening? Just tell me that. What's coming out of my back? I can't be certain, but I think it may be wings. Did you just say wings? Hitoshi gasped in alarm, and even Takoyami looked alarmed at the news. Yes, it's the only thing that makes sense and the reason why the quirk suppressants didn't work. It's a mutation. Boo. Hitoshi stopped and gritted his teeth when the wings shifted again, and then he realized his dad was right. The wings were trying to unfurl under his skin. The pain he's been feeling was the wings slowly raising. But I was kidnapped weeks ago, almost a month ago. I presume the late response is because of how early we got you out of that tank. The transfer was successful, but the quirk still had to grow, which explains why your back was itching as the wings grew. Regardless, we need to cut into your back, Mr. Aizawa, Takoyami interrupted him. With how these wings are bulging, if you cut into his back, the wings are already a length that once given some room, they're just going to burst through his skin regardless, Takoyami explained cautiously. Yes, it appears so. However, we can't let them burst through on their own. They're going to need help. Before you do, Itoshi stopped his father quickly. Can you please have Midnight knock me out before you do this? Either way, it sounds painful and I'd rather not be awake for this. Itoshi had tears in his eyes again. Smart, Aizawa said quickly. I hope we have the time. I'll tell her to hurry. He grabbed his phone to make the call. As he spoke quietly over the phone to Nimiri, who no doubt was asleep, there was a knock on the door. It's me, dearies, came Recovery Girl's sleepless voice. Dark Shadow, if you could, Takoyami requested, and Dark Shadow shot off to go and open the door. You shouldn't stay, Hitoshi whispered softly to Takoyami, making his friend look down in surprise. You don't wish me to? Not that. It's going to get bloody and you shouldn't see that, Itoshi whispered nervously. You've already seen me at my lowest a couple weeks ago. You shouldn't witness this. It's okay, I'm not going to leave you. Itoshi gave Takoyami a soft smile. Thank you. Itoshi let out a loud groan as another sharp wave of pain crashed through him and set his back ablaze. Hurry, Nem. Aizawa finally hung up the phone and Recovery Girl walked through the door. Oh dear, Recovery Girl gasped in alarm. We know. We're just waiting on Nimiri because Itoshi shouldn't be awake for this. Did you bring the scalpel? Shouta asked, and Recovery Girl nodded as she handed it to Aizawa. I would suggest getting the poor child to a hospital, but I see there's no way. Recovery Girl whispered softly. None at all, these things are getting ready to burst, and I just pray Nimiri gets here before it's too late. Shouta whispered nervously as now all they could do was wait. What kind of wings do you think I'll get? Itoshi asked Takoyami as he tried to keep the mood light. Takoyami looked puzzled but caught on quickly. I don't know. Itoshi cut him off with a grunt as he felt them shift again, begging to be free. And he tightened his hold on Takoyami, making Takoyami wince as well. Some of Hitoshi's hair fell into his face as he sucked in a deep breath to try to keep from crying out. Sorry, he whispered to Takoyami once the pain passed. Well, it would take Nimari a record amount of time to get to the dorms. The woman was still dressed in her PJs with her messy hair done in a sloppy bun. She wore her glasses, which was always a rarity. She didn't even put on shoes as she was barefoot. I'm here, oh Jesus, she gasped in surprise while putting her hand on her chest at the sight of Hitoshi's back. This made Hitoshi thankful that he couldn't see just how bad it was. Knock him out quick. Nem, keep it under his nose so he doesn't wake at all, Shouted told her. She nodded and almost pushed Takoyami out of the way so she could get to Hitoshi. Don't worry, dear, I'm going to keep you heavily sedated, she told him as she grabs her sleeve and starts to use a small amount of her quirk. Try and not breathe in if it gets too close to you, Takoyami, Nimari tells the other student. Hitoshi's nose feels like it's being stuffed with lavender before his eyes roll into the back of his head almost instantly and he passes out. Finally allowed some rest from this whole horrific ordeal. Hitoshi was growing sick of looking at hospital ceilings whenever he opened his eyes. With a heavy groan, Hitoshi rubs his eyes and sits up. You're awake, Takoyami speaks, and it makes him turn in surprise to see his friend sitting, perched, on a nearby chair. How long have I been out? About 12 hours or so. Shit. Hitoshi could only groan again and pinch his nose. How bad was it? Pretty gory, I won't lie. Very gory. Fumikage nearly fainted. Dark Shadow added, earing a soft scolding from her host. Regardless, Recovery Girl was able to heal you right up, and after being looked over you were deemed okay to stay in the infirmary. That's good. The wings. Hitoshi suddenly remembered and tried to look for them, but he couldn't see them. Did they fall off? Takoyami huffed a soft laugh. No, they're all right. You just have them furled. I have to admit they're rather pretty for lack of a better word. That is. Takoyami looked away and Hitoshi realized that Takoyami was blushing. Do the others? Hitoshi asked as he tried to look, but he still couldn't see them. They are aware something happened last night, but I don't think they know the full extent, Takoyami explained. Then he walked over to Hitoshi. Do you want me to show you? He asked, and his hand lightly touched Hitoshi's newfound wing. A shiver ran down Hitoshi's back as he felt it. He felt Takoyami's hand on this new appendage of his. Hitoshi swallowed hard but nodded, and Takoyami was gentle as he helped extend the wing out for Hitoshi to see. They're smaller than hawks, but I assume because they're still growing, Takoyami said, but Hitoshi was only half listening. Hitoshi's eyes were solely on his feathers. The feathers weren't what he was expecting at all. The wings were white with black spots. Each feather tip was black as well. He narrowed his eyes as he looked at the feathers. Snowy owl, he realized. These are snowy owl wings. My thoughts as well. Takoyami then returned the wing back to Hitoshi's back. I suppose this means you're going to need new training on how to use these things ... if they'll work at all, that is. Takoyami mused. What do you mean? These wings aren't yours. They were stolen for you. If I remember correctly, sometimes a quirk can't work if the body isn't used to it. Isn't that why Tenko was so itchy at the USJ? You raise a good point. Hitoshi looked at his back but still couldn't see the wings, and then he sighed and rubbed at his face. I hate knives, he whispered and shook his head. If he's given me a quirk that won't work for my body while still having my quirk. Takoyami put his hand on Hitoshi's. It's going to be okay. I'm going to help you. I may not know how to fly just yet, but I can still help in some aspects. Hitoshi smiled at Takoyami. Thank you, Takoyami. You're a great friend and I'm glad to have you. Takoyami cleared his throat. You know ... if you want, he rubbed the back of his neck almost nervously. You can call me Fumikage. Very well, Fumikage. Hitoshi was sure Fumikage was blushing now. So, where are the others? I figured my dads would be here as well. Fumikage coughed again. Dark Shadow wasn't lying ... Your room was covered in blood once the wings were able to bust out, so it's currently being cleaned. I mean, from what I saw, they were in hazmat suits. Oh wow, so they're going to be there for a while. In the meantime, I'll go and get you some food. You must be starved. Fumikage offered as he started to leave, and Hitoshi gave him a smile. Thank you. Of course. Hitoshi sighed and leaned back but found that rather uncomfortable, so he sat right back up. He then looked over by his nightstand and tilted his head as he noticed a shiny rock sitting on his nightstand, identical to the one he found a couple of weeks ago by his door. Huh, he whispered as he grabbed the rock and looked at it and inspected it. He didn't know what it meant, but he took it anyway. It was a really pretty rock. Bonus. It had happened so suddenly. After helping clean Hitoshi's gory room, Hizashi opened the door of the apartment and he gasped and jumped back as all of their cats ran out. Hey, but there was nothing he could do as Pumpkin led the charge and all of their cats were gone. He just stood there, mouth agape. How strange, I hope they'll be all right. He shook his head. Not even seconds later, Vlad's door violently opened, making Hisashi jump as he looked at his neighbor. "What?" he asked as Vlad glared at him. "What's your deal?" Vlad sucked in a slow and deliberate breath. "Has your menace of a cat been found yet?" he demanded in a slow and almost scary voice. "Moss, the one that's not neutered." "Yes, that would be Moss, Noe. Because I swear to God, Yamada, if my fairy gives birth to green kittens, I'm going to cut his balls off myself. She was a purebred and now she's tainted." And with that, Vlad turned and slammed his door shut. Hisashi stood there for several seconds before he could say the only thing on his mind. "Well, that's what you get for buying a purebred and leaving her unattended while she's in heat." For Itoshi, it was hard getting used to having wings. So hard, in fact, that he couldn't even unfurl them. Well, he could, but the issue was he couldn't unfurl it fully. He tried, but it wasn't that simple. So, a hero had to be called in to help. So, while the others were working on their ultimate moves for the provisional license for tomorrow, Itoshi was going to be training today, and hopefully, maybe if he was good enough, he could try the license tomorrow. Hawks whistled as he walked around Hitoshi and then grabbed Hitoshi's right wing and gently pulled at it to see the span. "Now these are pretty wings," Hawks complimented, which made Hitoshi blush a little, his face twinging a slight pink as he rubbed the back of his head. "Snowy owl, that's what Nedzu told me." Hitoshi nodded. "That's what my friend says as well." "Well, lucky for you, I happen to know a bit about birds. Snow owls are great for stealth because their wings are virtually silent for catching prey. However, there are some downsides, like flying will be almost impossible in the rain. Snow you can probably fly depending on the intensity, but not for long," Hawks explained as he took off his gloves and felt the fingers between his fingers. "Now, there are some places that sell a balm you can spread on your wings to make them waterproof temporarily." "Is that what you do?" Itoshi asked, and Hawks chuckled. "Only if I know it's going to rain," he admitted. "But the balm is only temporary. If you leave it on for too long, it could fray your wings, so if you use it, make sure to wash it out of your wings with soap." "Oh, I don't have the balm, but I'll keep that." In his hand was grabbed in a tiny little 8-ounce spray bottle in his hand. "I picked it up on the way," Hawks explained. "No need to thank me." Itoshi looked at the balm. Hawks approved. "Wing balm to keep those feathers nice and dry during the rain." Itoshi blinked as he read this. "You just have your own sponsored balm." Hawks shrugged before putting an arm on Hitoshi's head and leaning on him. "You'll understand when you become a hero," he said, and Itoshi wasn't sure he would understand. Regardless, Hawks took the balm back and opened it. "You're going to need a buddy," Hawks explained as he shook the spray up. "You won't be able to reach your wings, so you'll have to ask someone to help put it on and take it off." Then he applied it slowly to Hitoshi's wings. Hitoshi's face heated up suddenly. "But, you said it comes off with soap, meaning somebody will have to." His face turned scarlet. "Help me shower." "Just the wings." "Oh." Hitoshi winced when Hawks plucked a feather from Hitoshi's back. "Well, we know you have feelings in them, meaning you have full control most likely. So, I'm guessing you just need a little guidance." Now Hawks stepped in front of Hitoshi and smiled. "Eyes on me," he ordered, and Hitoshi watched him. Hawks' wings expanded to their full length, and Hitoshi tilted his head before looking at his own wings. Hitoshi whispered softly before he slowly tried to expand his wings like Hawks had done. His right wing slowly twitched and started to expand, but it was still struggling like it was being restricted. Hawks hummed and furled his wings back in. Then he approached Hitoshi's back. "Okay, I think I see the issue. You're thinking too hard about it and it's holding you back," Hawks explained as he stepped in front of Hitoshi again. "Think fast." Hitoshi raised his hand up and caught the wing bomb that Hawks threw at him with ease. Hawks smiled when Hitoshi pulled his arm down and then looked at Hawks confused. "See how you did that without thinking about that? You need to do that with your newfound wings," Hawks explained. "Think of your wings as another arm or leg, something you move without having to think about it." Hitoshi went quiet as he moved his right arm up and down like he was testing it out. "It's just another appendage," he whispered to himself and then looked back at his wing. "Just another appendage," he repeated. Hitoshi shut his eyes and exhaled slowly. "It's an arm or an leg." At this thought, his wings both unfurl so quickly that he loses a couple of feathers. Hitoshi laughed as he spun around quickly to admire his unfurled wings with a gasp. "There you go, you got it, kid." Hawks congratulated him. "You catch on fast." "Thank you, sir." Itoshi bowed. "It's not much, but it's most certainly a start. Just do it a few times for me, yeah? Opening and closing your wings. Get used to the feeling." Itoshi nodded and he furled his wings back in. They slowly closed in as they furled back against his back, and then he unfurled them with ease. He opened them slowly so he wouldn't lose any more feathers. He did this a few more times until it felt just a little more natural. Not perfectly natural, but enough times for him to get the hang of it at least. "Okay." Now Hawks had his hands out and then he motioned his fingers inwards with his palms up. "Give your wings a couple of flaps for me." "We're not going to have you fly just yet," Hawks ordered with a smile. Hitoshi sucked in an easy breath. He looked at Hawks before gently flapping his wings back and forth. A small breeze swept past Hawks and tousled his hair. "Perfect." You're doing great. Hawks was smiling and it made Itoshi smile. Now, let's go and test those wings. I thought we were. Itoshi inquired as Hawks turned and started walking out. I mean, for real. This was just training wheels. Now let's see how you do in the air. Sir, I don't know about this, Itoshi called as he stood at the very top of the UA roof with Hawks. Stop calling me sir, you're making me sound old. Hawks laughed as he flapped his mighty wings and hovered around Itoshi. He made it look easy as he glided over to Hitoshi's other side with no trouble whatsoever. Itoshi looked off of the edge of the roof before backing up a few steps. Maybe we could try something different, he asked. I mean, maybe a smaller roof. UA is kinda high. Nonsense. You got this, Lavender, Hawks told him. Just give your wings a few flaps to support your weight and soon you'll be soaring through the sky here. Let me help you. Itoshi did not know what Hawks' help was supposed to entail. He didn't know what he should have been expecting. Tips, pointers, anything. What he sure as hell didn't expect was when the man kicked him off of the roof. Itoshi let out a scream as he fell through the sky like dead weight. Oh god, this is it, he thought in his panic as the ground was coming up fast to meet him. He couldn't hear Hawks, but if he were still on the safety of the roof he would have heard Hawks mumble. You know, now that I think about it, I don't think Al is sore. In Hitoshi's mind the images of his family popped through his head. His 3 dads, Eri, Moss who was still missing. Was this really going to be the end? All because Naiz stole Hitoshi's quirk. Then ... he wasn't falling anymore. Hitoshi's owl wings were unfurled and flapping on their own. His feet were just inches from the ground, showing him how close he was to falling to his death. Hawks flew down and the two of them were talking in the air. See, I knew you could do it. High five. Hawks raised his hand in the air and Hitoshi paused but would inevitably return the high five. All right, you're a natural at this. Come on. Hawks then flew backward. I'll show you how to glide. Itoshi flapped his wings to get a little higher in the air and his whole body jerked to the side and he nearly lost his balance and fell from the sky. Hawks then gave a sharp whistle to get Itoshi to look at him. Don't think so hard about it, Hawks reminded him as he flapped his wings, red feathers floating to the ground as he moved a little higher in the air. Itoshi watched him. It's just another part of you, remember that? Another part of me. Like my brainwashing was. I could use that without problem because it was just another part of me, he whispered as he watched Hawks and how he flapped his wings. Hitoshi sucked in a deep breath before he shut his eyes. It's just another part of me, he reminded himself before he kept his eyes closed and let his wings do the work. He flapped and felt himself go higher and higher. Then he opened his eyes and looked down. He was most certainly a lot higher. There you go. Just be mindful of your balance. But from what Nezu told me, you're a dancer, right? Yeah, I do ballet. Itoshi blushed and Hawks smiled. And I was told that you work with Aizawa, so you know how to use the scarf. Yeah, I'm not as good as Dad, but I'm decent, I think. Then you need to use your knowledge of both of those things while in the air. Being in the air is all about balance and weight distribution. Should the situation call for a change, understand? Hawks inquired and Hitoshi nodded. Yeah, I think I got you. Good. Now Hawks gave his wings a mighty push to let himself fly upwards before he flipped and flew upside down for just a second before he righted himself. Try and keep up, he called over his shoulder. Hitoshi let out a gasp and immediately raced to catch up. Instantly his weight was off as he twisted and fumbled through the air horribly. Hitoshi felt himself lose altitude and he flipped to try and correct himself. All that did was make him run backwards once his feet hit his ground. Whoa, he yelled and jumped, giving his wings a flap. He was back in the air. Itoshi managed to get a few good flaps in and for a moment he thought he got it down, but his whole body shifted again and he found himself falling to the ground. Look out, he cried to the third years walking through the courtyard. He wasn't going to turn in time. He was going to crash into them. Gotcha. Itoshi was abruptly caught from under the arms by the third year in question. He felt like a toddler as Mirio Tagata held him up. Phew, that was close. Itoshi was then snatched from Mirio by Hawks. We're not done. Up you go, Hawks yelled as he threw Itoshi through the air with impressive strength. Itoshi flipped through the air with a scream from hell. Itoshi flapped his wings a few times to steady himself in the air and he sighed once his flipping stopped. Hawks flew up to Hitoshi and Hitoshi got to watch him fly up close. Then Hitoshi saw just what he was doing wrong when he watched Hawks move with his wings, not against his wings like Hitoshi had been doing. Keep up, Hawks called as he flew past Hitoshi with ease. They were so close that Hitoshi nearly went spinning. Hitoshi flapped his wings a few times and took off after Hawks in a chase. He smiled as he felt his body move towards the right and instead of trying to correct it he moved with it and before he knew it he was gliding. That's it. Hawks smiled down at Itoshi who was actually starting to keep up with Hawks. The two of them flew around UAS grounds with Hawks making tight turns on purpose. The tight turns did make Hitoshi lose balance just a bit, but eventually he found a way around losing his balance. If Itoshi had been paying any attention to the ground he would have noticed that the class had gotten out and everyone was watching him chase Hawks around in the air. Use the air to your advantage. Hawks told him Itoshi was losing altitude due to gliding. See if you can soar. If I can soar, Itoshi whispered. For just a moment this was everything his kid self wished for and more. A quirk that could take him away from his uncle. A quirk that could allow him freedom of the air and more. And Itoshi was sure Nais knew this, and that's why he was given wings. The wings had nothing to do with his hero training. Still, it only lasted a moment. He wanted his quirk back, his real quirk, but for now he decided to take this quirk as it was as he gave his wings a few hearty flaps with Hawks, and the two of them soared through the air together, never losing altitude. However, Hitoshi's new wings were starting to grow tired, and before too long he was losing altitude as his wings needed a rest. Hawks either sensed this or was growing tired himself as he also dropped with Hitoshi. Oh, I don't know how to land, Hitoshi realized as the ground was fast approaching. All of his work untangled as he felt himself lose balance. Whoa, whoa, he let out a cry and braced for impact. Gotcha. It was not Miro Tagata that caught him but rather Bakugo. The blonde had used his explosives to get to Hitoshi before Hitoshi hit the ground. The two of them tumbled safely into the grass with Bakugo having to hold Hitoshi up. Bakugo looked at Itoshi and Hitoshi's soul left his mouth as the weight of everything finally struck him, falling off of UAS roof, nearly crashing into the third years, and now nearly dive bombing into the grass. It was all just a bit too much for one boy to take. Word of advice: Hawks landed perfectly on a lamp post outside and perched on its edge, the show off. When you want to land, use your feet, not your face, Hawks instructed, and Hitoshi's soul was sucked back into his body when Bakugo gave him a little shake. Right, thank you, Hawks, I'll remember that next time, Hitoshi mumbled. Well, Oboro asked Hawks, do you think he can handle the provisional license, or should he sit out until the remake? Hawks motioned for Oboro to meet him up at the lamp post. Oboro made a cloud and flew up to meet with Hawks. The two of them spoke quietly with one another in the air before Oboro nodded and floated back down. Thank you, Hawks. Oboro waved the hero goodbye and Hawks flew up into the air. Hey, Hawks called to Hitoshi, who was newly freed from Bakugo's grasp. Hawks put both of his hands in his pockets as he let his wings keep him in the air. You'll have a handle on that quirk before you know it. Just remember what you learned today and everything else will come naturally. Hawks then gave a salute. See you soon, Takoyami, he told Takoyami before flying off. Huh, Takoyami blinked and looked at Itoshi, who just shrugged. Hawks was a weird one, but there's one thing that couldn't be denied. He was a pretty good teacher, even if his methods were a little unconventional to say the least. That night Itoshi and his dads had a long talk about the exam. You can wait till the retake, Shouta told Hitoshi. There's no pressure for you to take it now. That's what they wanted him to do, but Hitoshi didn't want that. While I'm not the greatest at my new quirk, after all it came in less than a week ago and is still growing, I think I want to try, he told them. If I fail ... then I'll train harder for the retake, he told them. While it was clear they might not have thought he was ready, they still nodded at his words. There was no harm in trying. None at all. The next morning he was on the bus with his classmates to take the exam, both excited and ... sad. Moss, I wish you were here, he thought as he watched the buildings go by. I wish you could witness this, but you're somewhere on the streets according to Nedzu ... Don't worry, I'm going to get you back, I promise, he thought with determination. He's probably alone and scared right now. Go. Adali yelled as all the cats ran out of the store while the owners gave chase. Izuku had a bag of chips in his mouth. Muffin had somehow stolen a pack of chicken livers and was making a run for it right behind him. Cactus had a bag of raw shrimp in his mouth, and that was just the cats Izuku could see. Adali and Kola were both on lookout, so they were the only ones without food. The owner of the small store was giving chase, but even with their mouths full of stolen goods, the cats were much faster. Several people jumped back to get out of the way, much to the owner's frustration. No, stop them, they're stealing my stuff, the man yelled as they darted down the aisles at top speed. The whole gang made it out of the automatic doors and crossed the street with no problem. Izuku heard the owner scream in frustration once all of them were away from the store. Izuku looked back and the man slammed the broom down in his ire. I'll get you, you green menace. I'll tell the HPSC about you and you'll be captured, the owner screamed as he pointed at Izuku. Izuku's ears went back before he rolled his eyes and rushed to catch up with the others. When they made it back to their little hideout, everyone gave whoops and hollers of celebration. I can't believe we did it. Root jumped around his back of stolen pork rinds and Izuku gave a purr as several of the others either bumped heads or were giving little victory dances. Muffin dropped her package of chicken livers with a satisfied huff. I have to give it to you, Izuku, your little plan worked wonderfully, Muffin said, and Izuku dropped his bag of chips and paused to catch her breath. Yes, but if it wasn't for Adali and Kola we never would have done it, he said. The plan was simple. Adali and Kola distract the owner, and they did, while the cats just snuck inside. By the time the owner realized what had happened, it was too late. Good job on playing injured, Natalie, Cola said, and Natalie let out a little chuckle at this. It wasn't exactly hard. Olive stretched out as she looked at the food she had managed to snag, a bag of dried anchovies. Should we eat? She asked, and Muffin nodded. We deserved it. But don't go crazy. Save some, don't eat, throw up, and eat more. She told the others, and they all nodded in agreement before digging into their food. Izuku opened his bag of chips, and the smell of shrimp hit his nose, and he paused before giving an involuntary hiss at the food. Shrimp. Warn. I'd rather moss, not of a scallop. I may not be able to touch him unless he has a bath. Itoshi's voice resonated in Izuku's mind, and he paused before looking around. Itoshi wasn't here. Izuku took a step back. This didn't go unnoticed. Here, have some of mine if you don't want that. Cactus didn't hesitate to push his bag of raw shrimp to Izuku. The shrimp was still frosty. Izuku shook his head. Can't have it. Izuku softly told Cactus. Why not? He asked with a head tilt. I'll have some. Natalie snagged a mouthful of shrimp before walking away to enjoy her food in peace. Izuku suddenly wasn't hungry anymore. He didn't really say anything to anyone as he just walked away and jumped up the nearest fire escape. The others watched this. He could feel them. He paid them no mind as he instead got up to the roof of the nearby building and just laid in the warming sun with a huff. I miss you, he thought while looking at the sky. What are you doing right now? Trying to get used to being quirkless. Splat. A chicken liver fell right at his face. You need to eat, Muffin said as her paws stepped up to him. Izuku looked at her before giving a soft huff. Not hungry, he mumbled while looking back at the sky. That'd be a first. I'm not fat. Izuku scoffed, and she just chuckled before she laid next to him. She tucked her legs under her and made herself into a loaf. I know, it's all fur, she said softly. So, what's on your mind? Izuku pouted, and he let his head drop lazily to the side. Nothing, liar, I guess. I just miss my owner, he told her. I didn't realize I grabbed shrimp chips and he's allergic to shrimp. Muffin sighed. The plight of a house cat. Why'd you leave him anyways? Seems like he treated you better than any of us got treated. I did it for his safety. It's hard to explain fully, Izuku said while looking at the daytime sky. There wasn't a cloud in it. Look, I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do. If you want to go back to him, go back. If not, then stay. She told him matter-of-factly. You've well earned your spot amongst the gang. We're not going to chase you down should you choose to leave, and we're not kicking you out either, she explained to him. Izuku gave a weak smile at this, and then he sat up. I appreciate it. But unfortunately for you guys, I'm here to stay. He grabbed the liver in front of his face and started to slowly munch on it despite still not being that hungry. I'm doing this for Itoshi. I have to. Very well. Muffin looked at the sky and then smiled. You don't think anything is gonna come from taking it from that store, do you? Izuku laughed a little. Nah, I've stolen from them plenty of times. Hey, who knows, maybe you'll get your picture next to mine. Bonus. Itoshi couldn't believe he passed. He just couldn't believe it. Honestly, nobody believed it, not just him, but the first test was rather easy with his wings. Everyone in the test was using the sports festival as guidance, and because Itoshi didn't have wings, they didn't expect him, and that's what made the first test so easy. The second test with rescuing people was a little harder, he wouldn't lie. He was docked a few points and almost didn't pass that test. He thought he was done for when he nearly dropped someone in the air. But he passed. In fact, almost everyone passed. Almost. Todoroki was the only one to not pass in their class, but that's because he decided to get into a pissing contest with someone from another school at the worst possible time. So, he would have to take the remake. So now everyone was currently in the common room to celebrate their win. Minus Shoto for obvious reasons. Itoshi. Momo called for him as he was in the kitchen talking with Anjiro. Itoshi turned his head towards her yell and walked from the kitchen before he crossed the threshold. Nito had his arm and was walking him towards the TV. It's Moss, Nito said to Hitoshi, and Hitoshi's heart plummeted. This didn't feel like a happy moment. They got Itoshi to the TV where Toga, Dabai, Tamura, and Jin were already sitting as others were standing around. Bakugo walked next to Hitoshi at the mention of Moss's name, and they looked at each other in understanding. So, they stood behind the couch and watched as the TV was casting from Tamura's laptop. This news segment was uploaded a few hours ago. I just saw it and felt that you guys should see it as well. Hitoshi, is this Moss? Tamura asked before he pressed play and the TV sprung to life. A newswoman was standing in front of a familiar-looking store. I'm standing here with the owner of this local grocery store that was robbed this morning by what he called a gang of cats. On the screen, the picture changed as a different newscaster spoke explaining the scene. As you can see, at least 12 cats came in and robbed the store owner. Yes, robbed as the owner believes the particular green cat seen here. The picture paused as a familiar green cat was seen running into the store first. They zoomed in on the blurry camera image, but there wasn't a doubt in Hitoshi's mind despite the blurriness that was Moss. The camera zoomed out and soon even more cats rushed inside of the store. Maybe intelligent, as you can see for yourselves. The normal-looking cats all looked back at him before taking off to steal an item. This cat himself chose a bag of chips, one a package of livers, and so on. The scene changed back to the newswoman and the shop owner. The owner grabbed the mic from the woman and spoke. "This cat has stolen from me in the past. I thought he was done, but clearly not. He's a menace not just to me but to others, as he was actually caught stealing from the vending machines with the same cat. Someone needs to get this cat off of the streets before he does any more harm. I've already called the HPSC and they're sending someone out to find him. But if anybody sees this green cat, do not let him near you." Tamura paused the video, and soon everyone was looking at Itoshi. Itoshi, surprising everyone, grinned. "I know exactly where he is.